Alright, how's it going? So, this is the Flesh Garden, all 3 parts, all in one. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. No commentary at the end, it's just all parts put together. I hope you guys enjoy it. I enjoyed writing it again. Yeah. Thank you for all the support. And all the comments and all the likes and everything, it means a lot. And it's helping me get the motivation to write more stories. So if you like this, please like, comment, subscribe, all the stuff. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much again. Bye.
I stand amidst the ruins of Veridius Prime, my boots sinking into the ashen soil that was once teeming with life. My gaze drifts over the devastated landscape, a haunting tableau of a war that has consumed both the planet and my soul. In the eerie silence, my voice, a mere whisper, breaks the stillness. 4 years, I murmur, each word a heavy stone in my chest. 4 years since the 113th Caledon Rangers set foot on this cursed planet. My mind, a maelstrom of memories, catapults me back to that fateful day. The flashback is vivid, unforgiving. We arrived, a band of naive soldiers, eager and untested. The planet greeted us with its lush greenery, a deceptive mask hiding the lurking horror. I remember the vibrant colours, the lively chatter of my squad, and the sense of purpose that filled us. How starkly it contrasts with the desolation that now surrounds me. Early conflicts with the Tyranids were sporadic, almost like testing the waters. We fought with a determination born of ignorance, believing our might and the Emperor's blessing sufficient. I recall the first skirmish, a blur of gunfire, screams, and the alien shrieks of our foes. We were victorious, but at a cost. The first of many comrades fell that day, their youthful faces forever etched in my memory. In those early days, camaraderie was our shield. We bonded in the trenches, shared stories from our homeworlds, and laughed in the face of danger. I find a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Fool's laughter, I whisper, my voice tinged with a sorrow that has deepened with each passing day. As I stand here, a lone figure in a wasteland, the ghosts of my fallen comrades hover around me. Their whispers blend with the wind, a chorus of the damned. I close my eyes, allowing their voices to wash over me, a reminder of what we once were and what we have become. The skies above, now choked with spores, and the shadows of Tyranid bioships bear witness to our struggle. I look up, my eyes tracing the outlines of our Imperial fleet, distant and almost untouchable. A fleeting sense of hope flutters in my heart, quickly smothered by the crushing reality of our situation. Veridius Prime, a planet we were sworn to protect, has become a living nightmare, its transformation a grotesque mirror of my own. The trenches, our home for these endless years, are now part of the Tyranid hive. I feel the alien presence around me, a constant reminder of our impending doom. We thought we were the hunters, but we were the prey all along. The irony is not lost on me. We came as conquerors, only to be conquered, assimilated into the very horror we sought to destroy. The ruins of Veridius Prime stretch before me, a desolate expanse that mirrors the desolation within me. I turn my back to the wreckage, my mind set on the task ahead. There's a war to be fought, a duty to be fulfilled, no matter how hopeless it seems. As I walk back into the labyrinth of trenches, my footsteps are heavy, each one a testament to the weight I carry, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere of the planet. But my resolve remains, a flickering flame in the overwhelming darkness. This is my story, my burden. I am Guardsman Lysandra, of the 113th Caledon Rangers, and this is the tale of Veridius Prime, the planet that devoured us all.
Sergeant Lysandra, of the 113th Caledon Rangers, stands at the edge of a trench on Veridius Prime, her gaze sweeping over the labyrinthine network of earthworks and fortified positions. The air is heavy, filled with the stench of decay and the metallic tang of spilled blood. The ski dismal grey seems to press down upon the world, suffocating hope under its oppressive weight. In these trenches, life has become a continuous cycle of vigilance and survival. Sergeant Lysandra's squad, a hardened group of soldiers, moves with a mechanical efficiency born of necessity. Each day blurs into the next, punctuated only by sporadic Tyranid attacks and the ever-present gnawing fear of what lies beyond their fortifications. The trenches themselves have transformed from mere defensive structures into grotesque galleries of war. Here, the bones of fallen comrades lie entwined with the twisted remnants of Tyranid bioforms, a grim mosaic of conflict. As Sergeant Lysandra patrols the trench, her boots squelch in the mud, a mixture of soil and alien ichor. She passes by her soldiers, each face a mask of exhaustion and resolve. Corporal Jackson, her second in command, nods grimly as they cross paths, their brief eye contact conveying a world of unspoken understanding. The camaraderie amongst them is palpable, yet it is a bond forged in the crucible of horror, a fragile thread holding them together against the encroaching darkness. Whispers of the Tyranid menace are a constant undercurrent in the trench. Sergeant Lysandra overhears snippets of conversation, soldiers speculating on the next attack, sharing tales of close encounters, their voices tinged with a mix of bravado and terror. Despite their bravado, a growing sense of dread permeates the air, as insidious as the Tyranid presence that encroaches upon their world. In this hellscape, the notion of a normal life has become a distant memory, a ghost haunting the edges of Sergeant Lysandra's mind. She remembers a time before the war, a time of laughter and light, now as alien to her as the Tyranids themselves. But there is no room for such reflections here. Survival demands her full attention, every sense honed to detect the slightest hint of the enemy. As Sergeant Lysandra continues her patrol, her eyes fix on the horizon, where the twisted forms of Tyranid structures mar the once beautiful landscape of Veridius Prime. A sense of foreboding fills her, a silent acknowledgement that this war, this unending nightmare, has only just begun. Sergeant Lysandra trudges through the sinuous trenches of Veridius Prime, her boots sinking into the unnaturally soft earth. The air, thick with the stench of decay and fear, clings to her like a second skin. She pauses, her hazel eyes scanning the grotesque landscape that was once a lush, thriving world. Now it stands as a testament to the horrors of war against the Tyranids, a nightmarish garden of flesh and alien flora.
Everything's changed,
Murmurs Sergeant Lysandra to herself, her voice a mere whisper in the cacophony of distant artillery fire. The plants around the trenches are no longer the familiar green of imperial worlds. They bear a sinister hue, their leaves unfurling like the fingers of a corpse reaching from the grave. The soil, too, feels different beneath her feet, softer, almost sentient, as if pulsating with a life of its own. Corporal Jackson, her second in command, approaches, his face etched with concern.
Sergeant, are you seeing this?
He asks, gesturing toward the altered vegetation. Sergeant Lysandra nods slowly, her gaze never leaving the eerie plants.
It's them, Jackson. The Tyranids are reshaping everything, turning our world into theirs.
The two soldiers continue their patrol, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily upon them. Suddenly, a private trooper Mira, a young determined face in the squad, points towards a cluster of trees.
Sarge, look at the birds.
She exclaims. Sergeant Lysandra's gaze follows Trooper Mira's pointing finger. The birds circle erratically, their flight patterns disjointed, as if the very air they glide through is poisoned by the alien presence.
It's like they're trying to escape the planet itself.
Sergeant Lysandra mutters, a sense of foreboding settling in her stomach. The patrol progresses, the sense of something being profoundly wrong growing with each step. Suddenly, Private Cale, the squad's heavy weapons specialist, halts, his expression twisted in horror.
Do you hear that, Sarge? The ground, it's breathing.
Private Cale stammers, his voice trembling. Sergeant Lysandra kneels, placing her ear to the ground. There it is, a faint rhythmic pulsation, like the beating of a gargantuan heart beneath the soil. A shiver runs down her spine as she realizes the planet itself is becoming an extension of the Tyranid hive.
Sergeant, what does it mean?
Trooper Naira, the support infantry, asks, her voice barely a whisper.
It means we're not just fighting the Tyranids.
Sergeant Lysandra replies, standing up.
We're fighting Veridius Prime itself.
As night falls, the squad huddles in a makeshift bunker. The tension is palpable, each soldier lost in their thoughts, grappling with the reality that their battlefield is alive, an enemy as much as the Tyranids themselves. Sergeant Lysandra looks at her squad, her heart heavy with the burden of leadership.
Listen up.
She begins, her voice steady despite the turmoil within.
This planet, our home, is turning against us. But we are the 113th Caledon Rangers. We do not yield, not to the Tyranids, not to this planet.
Her words are met with nods, a silent pact formed in the dim light of the bunker. They are soldiers of the Imperium, and they will fight until their last breath, even if it means battling the very ground they stand on. The night passes with whispers echoing through the walls, a constant reminder of the looming threat outside. As dawn breaks, Sergeant Lysandra readies her squad for another day in the trenches, her resolve unbroken. Yet, deep within, she knows the truth. This war is more than a fight for survival. It's a battle against a planet transformed into a grotesque garden of flesh and alien nightmares, a grim struggle in a world where hope seems as distant as the stars above. Deep within the serpentine labyrinth of trenches on Veridius Prime, Sergeant Lysandra leads her squad, the 113th Caledon Rangers, on a somber patrol. The trench, a jagged scar cut into the planet's flesh, provides a stark contrast to the Tyranid-altered landscape, sprawling ominously beyond their fortified walls.
Stay vigilant.
Lysandra instructs, her voice barely rising above a whisper. Each step they take is measured, cautious, reverberating softly against the earthen walls. The trench itself is a grim reminder of the ongoing war, its walls a patchwork of metal reinforcements and hastily dug earth. Private Kyle, his heavy weapon resting on his shoulder, peers nervously at the alien vista beyond their protective confines.
This silence, it's like the calm before a storm, Sarge.
He mutters, his gaze fixed on the distant, twisted shapes that mar the horizon. Lysandra nods, her hazel eyes scanning the grotesque tableau before them. The Tyranids have reshaped Veridius Prime into a nightmarish landscape, their bioforms and structures melding with the natural environment to create a tableau of horror.
Their presence is everywhere.
She remarks, her voice tinged with a weary resolve.
We're mere intruders here.
Specialist Tira, positioned a few paces behind, focuses her sniper's scope on a distant Tyranid structure.
Look at that.
She says, her tone a mix of fear and fascination.
The way those spires twist and turn, it's like they're alive.
Indeed, the Tyranid constructions possess an eerie semblance of life, their surfaces pulsating subtly, as if breathing. Lysandra shivers slightly, the sight unnerving in its alien familiarity. The Tyranids haven't just invaded Veridius Prime, they've woven themselves into its very essence. As the squad moves deeper into the trench network, the oppressive silence weighs heavily upon them. Their footsteps and hushed voices are the only sounds in a world that seems to hold its breath. Corporal Jackson, Lysandra's right hand, falls into step beside her.
What do you think they're planning, Sarge?
He asks, his voice low. Lysandra glances at the bioorganic panorama visible beyond the trench.
It's hard to say, but the Tyranids are never idle. They're preparing, evolving.
The silence stretches on, a haunting prelude to the unspoken horrors that await. The squad members exchange wary looks, their unease growing with each step through the winding trenches. The patrol continues, with Lysandra leading her squad through the convoluted maze of trenches. Every so often, they stop to observe the alien landscape, watching for any sign of movement or impending attack. As they near the end of their patrol route, Lysandra pauses, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where the twisted silhouettes of the Tyranid swarm loom. She feels a surge of dread mixed with determination.
This war, it's far from over.
She says, more to herself than to her squad.
We'll be ready, Sarge.
Corporal Jackson responds, his voice steady. Lysandra and her squad make their way back to the relative safety of their command post, the unsettling stillness of the trenches echoing around them. In the grim darkness of their world, they brace for the inevitable conflict, their resolve unbroken despite the overwhelming odds. The war on Veridius Prime is a testament to their endurance, a grim dance with an enemy that seeks to consume everything in its path. Chapter 2. The War That Consumed the World. The trenches of Veridius Prime stretch before Guardsman Lysandra, like the veins of a decaying leviathan, a network of despair carved deep into the planet's flesh. From her vantage point, the vast labyrinth seems to breathe, each shuddering exhale filled with the stench of death and the alien taint of the Tyranids. The sky above, once a canvas of vibrant hues, now drowns under a canopy of ominous spore clouds, casting a perpetual twilight over the scarred landscape. Patrolling these trenches is a ritual in vigilance and dread. Guardsman Lysandra leads her squad, the 113th Caledon Rangers, through the serpentine maze, their steps a rhythmic echo in the vast emptiness. They move with a purpose born of necessity, maintaining their weapons with meticulous care, each action a small defiance against the overwhelming sense of futility.
Keep your eyes sharp.
Lysandra instructs, her voice a hushed command that cuts through the oppressive silence. Her hazel eyes, hardened by years of conflict, scan the horizon for any sign of the Tyranid menace. Corporal Jackson, a stoic figure with a strategic mind, nods in agreement.
Every shadow could be a lurking death.
He replies, his gaze never leaving the trench walls, overgrown with alien flora that seem to watch them with a sinister intent. Private Cale, the heavy weapons specialist of the group, clutches his gun tighter, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips.
I prefer a Tyranid over another night listening to Vox's snoring.
He jests, trying to lighten the mood. Lysandra offers a small, weary smile. It's a fleeting moment of camaraderie, a brief respite from the unrelenting grimness of their reality. But the smile quickly fades, replaced by the ever-present shadow of despair that haunts her thoughts. The squad continues their march, the rhythmic sound of their boots a somber drumbeat against the earth. They pass remnants of battles long past, the trench walls adorned with the detritus of war, shattered helmets, spent shell casings and faded banners. Each item tells a silent tale of valor and loss, a reminder of the countless lives swallowed by this endless conflict. As they delve deeper into the trenches, the air grows thicker, a miasma of decay and alien corruption. The landscape around them is a grotesque tapestry of the Tyranids' work, the once verdant flora now twisted into nightmarish shapes, serving the whims of the hive mind. Lysandra pauses, her senses heightened. The eerie silence is oppressive, a prelude to the storm she knows is coming. She glances back at her squad, their faces etched with lines of weariness and resolve. They are her responsibility, her family forged in the crucible of war. The distant sound of artillery fire rumbles through the air, a grim reminder of the ongoing conflict. Lysandra's thoughts drift to the countless battles they have faced, the friends they have lost. Each memory is a scar upon her soul, a testament to the brutal nature of this war. The trenches stretch out before her, a maze of despair and resilience, a battleground where hope is a rare commodity. In the grim darkness of Veridius Prime, she prepares her squad for the horrors that await, a never-ending struggle against an enemy as relentless as time itself. Guardsman Lysandra stands amidst the ruinous trenches of Veridius Prime, her gaze drifting across the grotesque transformation of what was once a lush world. The alien flora, bizarre in their appearances, stretch across the scarred landscape, hinting at the insidious Tyranid presence. Lysandra's fingers brush against the strange, chitinous plants, her expression a mix of curiosity and growing unease. A disturbance catches Lysandra's attention. A flock of native birds, now deformed, flutter erratically above. Their strange behavior, avoiding certain areas as if repulsed or terrified, speaks of an unnatural influence pervading the air. Lysandra watches, a sense of dread building within her. Her patrol leads her to Trooper Silas, who seems lost in his own world, muttering under his breath.
The ground. It breathes. Whispers in the walls.
He says, his eyes wide with fear. Lysandra places a hand on his shoulder, trying to ground him in reality, but his words echo in her mind, amplifying the growing sense of terror. Climbing to a vantage point, Lysandra surveys the alien landscape. The sight is a stark contrast to her memories of Veridius Prime, now a world twisted by Tyranid corruption. The natural beauty is replaced by a nightmarish tableau where the ground seems to pulsate with a sinister life of its own. Gathering her squad for a briefing, Lysandra's voice is somber yet firm. She emphasizes the need for vigilance, not just against the visible Tyranid threats, but also the unseen ones. Medic Ilara and Engineer Vox nod in agreement, their faces set with grim determination. As they traverse the trenches, the squad encounters a grotesque scene, a Tyranid creature feasting on the remains of a fallen comrade. The sight is a visceral reminder of the horror they face, a grotesque blend of the familiar and the alien. The squad readies their weapons, their expressions a mix of horror and resolve. The encounter quickly escalates into a fierce skirmish. Lysandra leads the charge, her chainsword cutting through the Tyranid bioforms with brutal efficiency. Each swing of her blade is a dance with death, her movements both graceful and savage. The squad follows her lead, their laser guns blazing, carving a path through the swarm. In the heat of battle, Lysandra's senses sharpen, her instincts heightened by the adrenaline rush. She moves with a predatory precision, her every strike a testament to her skill and resilience. The action is relentless, the clash of steel against chitin filling the air with a cacophony of violence. As the last of the Tyranid creatures fall, the squad catches their breath, the aftermath a stark reminder of their grim reality. The trenches are filled with the echoes of their battle, a grim chorus to the tragedy that unfolds daily on Veridius Prime. Returning to their base, Lysandra reflects on the day's events. Her thoughts are heavy with the weight of their losses, the hopelessness of their situation pressing down on her. Yet, amidst the despair, a flicker of determination remains. They are the Imperium's last line of defense on this forsaken world, and they will stand their ground no matter the cost. Lysandra gazed into the night sky, the stars obscured by the Tyranid spores. Her face is weary, yet resolute, a symbol of the unyielding human spirit in the face of overwhelming darkness. The haunting monologue of her thoughts serves as a poignant reminder of the cost of war, a price paid in blood and tears under the shadow of a grim universe. Sergeant Lysandra crouches low, her hazel eyes scanning the murky twilight of Veridius Prime's ravaged landscape. She's a silhouette against the alien-infused horrors that have overrun her once verdant world, now a macabre garden of flesh and chitin. The trenches, a labyrinthine network of despair, stretch out like open wounds, reflecting the sky's sickly pallor. The air is thick with the promise of nightmares. A patrol, her faithful Caledon Rangers, moves with her, each step a testament to their resilience and their unspoken dread. Specialist Tira's sniper rifle whispers death, its barrel glinting briefly as they pass a rare beam of moonlight. Engineer Vox's tech-savvy hands are forever fiddling, adjusting, preparing, and Scout Lawn, ever silent, leads them through the twisted underbrush that this planet has become.
Keep sharp.
Lysandra's voice is a gravelly murmur, barely audible over the sound of their own cautious movements and the distant, unsettling calls of Tyranid beasts.
We're not alone.
Indeed, the mutated fauna, a grotesque parody of nature's intent, watches them with unseen eyes. As they progress, a shape moves at the edge of Lysandra's vision. A small creature, barely the size of a child's toy, but its presence sends a chill down her spine. Its form is a disturbing blend of the planet's original creatures and the invasive Tyranid biology. Even in the dim light, its bioluminescent parts cast an eerie glow.
By the Emperor.
Whispers Medica Lara, her voice a mix of fear and fascination.
Don't touch it.
Lysandra commands, her gaze never leaving the creature.
This is what they do, twist and corrupt. Remember who we are and what we're doing here.
They move on, leaving the creature behind, but its image lingers in Lysandra's mind, a symbol of the planet's, and perhaps their own, inevitable transformation. As night fully claims the sky, they find themselves back in the trenches, the oppressive closeness a grim comfort against the vastness of the alien landscape. Here, the sounds of the Tyranids are closer, more personal. Whispers of chitin on dirt, the faint rustling of wings and distant haunting cries fill the air, melding into a chorus of dread. They take turns keeping watch, eyes fixed on the murky nothingness beyond the trench. But it's not just the darkness they fear, it's the silence, the anticipation of a horror they know is coming, but can never fully prepare for. In her quarters, a small, cramped space she's claimed as her own, Lysandra sits with her journal. The pages are filled with her neat, compact handwriting. Observations orders the names of the fallen. Her latest entry is a reflection of the day, a recount of the creature they encountered, her fears for her squad, her planet.
It's like the very soul of Veridius Prime is being devoured bit by bit.
She writes.
And I fear what will be left of us when it's done.
Her hand hesitates above the paper, then continues, each word a struggle against the despair that threatens to consume her.
We fight. Not because we hope to win, but because we must. Because even in this hell we carry the light of the Emperor, the spirit of humanity. And perhaps in the end that will be enough.
Outside, the sounds of the night continue. The distant roar of a Tyranid predator, the soft, trembling response of its prey, the unending whispers of an alien world. Inside, Lysandra closes her journal, the ink still wet on the page. She stares into the darkness of her quarters, the weight of command, of survival heavy on her shoulders. But even as she contemplates the grim future, a small, defiant flame of resolve kindles within her. She is Guardsman Lysandra, Sergeant of the 113th Caledon Rangers. No matter how grotesque the enemy, how subtle its encroachments, she will stand firm. For her squad, for her planet, for the Imperium. Chapter 3. The Landscape Transformed. The trenches of Veridius Prime, once mere scars upon a vibrant world, now stretch like open wounds across a planet transformed. Tyranid biomorphic structures rise ominously, a grotesque mockery of the planet's native flora. Amidst this alien landscape, Guardsman Lysandra, sergeant of the 113th Caledon Rangers, stands at a trench vantage point, her gaze lost in the eerie transformation before her. Guardsman Lysandra's voice, a soft, haunting murmur, breaks the oppressive silence.
4 years.
She begins, her words laced with a growing sense of despair.
4 years on Veridius Prime, and I've watched it die 1,000 deaths. Each day, a little more of what it once was slips away, consumed by this living nightmare.
Her squad, scattered around her in the trench, listens in somber silence. Corporal Jackson, a shadow of his former self, nods in quiet agreement, his eyes reflecting the same loss and weariness that haunt Lysandra's.
We fight not just the Tyranids,
Lysandra continues.
but the very planet we stand on. It's no longer our world. It breathes, it bleeds, but not for us. For them. The Tyranids have woven themselves into its very essence, turning our battlefield into a grotesque garden of their flesh.
Specialist Tira, once a sharpshooter with an unbreakable spirit, now looks out over the alien terrain with a hollow gaze.
The planet itself is against us, Sergeant.
She whispers, her voice barely audible.
Every step we take, every breath we draw, it's as if Veridius Prime itself wishes to expel us, like we're the invaders.
The air around them is thick with a palpable sadness, the unspoken acknowledgement of their hopeless situation. Private Cale, his youthful enthusiasm long since eroded by the horrors of war, clenches his fists, the knuckles white.
So what do we do, Sergeant? Keep fighting. For what?
Lysandra turns her gaze to her squad, her eyes glimmering with a complex mix of resolve and sorrow.
We fight because that's all we have left, Cale. We fight because giving in means letting this world, our comrades' sacrifices, be for nothing.
Her words, though intended to inspire, hang heavy in the trench, a somber reminder of their grim reality. Medic Ilara, her hands stained with the blood of too many fallen comrades, looks up from her medkit, her eyes meeting Lysandra's.
And what of us, Sergeant? What happens when we can no longer distinguish ourselves from the horrors we battle?
Lysandra's gaze drifts back to the alien landscape, the Tyranid structures pulsating in the distance.
Then we become part of Veridius Prime's tragic tale.
She replies, her voice a mere whisper, yet carrying the weight of their collective dread.
A tale of soldiers who fought not just an enemy, but the very world they sought to protect.
As the echo of Lysandra's words fades, the trench falls silent once more, each soldier lost in their own reflections. The grotesque beauty of the Tyranid-altered world stretches before them, a constant reminder of their fading hope and the unrelenting terror that defines their existence on Veridius Prime. Amid the suffocating trenches of Veridius Prime, a planet now more alien than terrestrial, Sergeant Lysandra of the 113th Caledon Rangers stands, her gaze fixed upon a grotesque testament to the Tyranids' insidious influence. Beside her, Specialist Tira, her features etched with apprehension, scrutinizes the pulsating plants that have emerged from the war-ravaged soil. The flora, a perverse mimicry of nature, throbs with an ungodly rhythm, their vibrant hues stark against the grey pallor of the trench.
Look at them.
Tira whispers, her voice barely audible over the distant clamour of war.
It's as if Veridius Prime itself is transforming, succumbing to these abominations.
Lysandra's response is a silent nod, her mind a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. The sergeant's scar, a stark line down her cheek, seems to pulse in tandem with the alien growths, a physical echo of the planet's violation. Further along the trench, Private Cale and Medic Ilara exchange troubled glances. The air, thick with an almost tangible dread, weighs heavily upon their shoulders. Ilara's hands, usually so steady when tending to the wounded, tremble slightly as she points toward a cluster of bioluminescent fungi.
By the Emperor.
She murmurs.
The very ground we walk on, it's as if it's alive, watching, waiting.
Her voice trails off, the implications too horrific to voice fully. Sergeant Lysandra, overhearing Ilara's observation, turns her gaze towards the creeping vines that have begun to intertwine with the trench's fortifications. The vines move with an unsettling autonomy, their tendrils slowly encroaching upon the human-made structures.
Vox.
Lysandra calls out, her tone commanding yet laced with an undercurrent of uncertainty.
What do you make of this?
Engineer Vox, his eyes shielded behind tech-enhanced goggles, scans the creeping vines.
It's like nothing I've ever seen, Sergeant. The Tyranids, they're not just altering the landscape, they're weaving it into something otherworldly.
The squad gathered around their sergeant, each bears the weight of the war's horrors in their own way. Their faces, once youthful and determined, now carry the burden of endless conflict, a silent testament to the price of their struggle. As Lysandra leads her squad deeper into the trench network, the atmosphere grows increasingly oppressive. The distant sounds of artillery and alien roars merge into a haunting cacophony, a soundtrack to the madness that has enveloped Veridius Prime.
Stay vigilant.
Lysandra instructs, her voice steady despite the growing unease clawing at her mind.
We don't know what we're dealing with here.
The squad advances, their movements cautious and deliberate. Each step takes them further into a landscape that defies reality, where the familiar horrors of war blend with the grotesque manifestations of an alien ecology. The trench, once a refuge against the Tyranid onslaught, now feels like a corridor leading into the maw of madness itself. In the shadows of this transformed world, Sergeant Lysandra's thoughts turn inward. The war has taken much from her, comrades, innocence, and perhaps even a part of her humanity. As she leads her squad through the eerie silence of the trenches, she can't shake the feeling that Veridius Prime, with its alien-infested landscapes, is a mirror to her own soul. Scarred, transformed, and teetering on the brink of an abyss, the journey through the trenches becomes a macabre exploration, a passage through a world that is both familiar and utterly alien. With each step, the subtle horror of their situation becomes more apparent, and the growing sense of dread among the squad palpable. Sergeant Lysandra and her squad confront not only the physical enemy of the Tyranids, but also the psychological terror of a world and a war cell that has warped beyond recognition. In the dim light of a makeshift command center, hewn from the very bowels of Veridius Prime, Guardsman Lysandra stands before the 113th Caledon Rangers. Her hazel eyes, once a beacon of resilience, now mirror the despair suffusing the trenches. The air is thick, not just with the stench of war, but with the heavy weight of an impending doom.
Listen up.
Lysandra's voice cuts through the silence, as firm as the ground beneath their feet, yet tinged with an unspoken dread.
The Tyranids won't give us a warning. They never do. Stay sharp, stay alive. Remember, these are no mere beasts. They're the embodiment of our nightmares, and they will stop at nothing.
Trooper Mira, her youthful face a contrast to the war-hardened visages around her, shifts uneasily.
Sergeant, how do we prepare for something we can't predict?
Her voice, though steady, betrays the fear lurking beneath. Lysandra meets Mira's gaze, her own fears masked behind a veneer of composure.
We adapt, we survive. It's what we've always done.
The words are meant to inspire, but they hang in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken horrors. The quiet before the storm settles over the trenches, a suffocating stillness that belies the carnage to come. Guardsman Lysandra patrols the labyrinthine network, her steps measured, her senses attuned to every whisper of the wind, every rustle in the dark. Trooper Harlan, a man whose humor had once been as robust as his stature, now stands quietly beside the trench wall.
It's too quiet,
he mutters, his usual jovial tone subdued by the oppressive atmosphere.
Feels like the whole planet's holding its breath.
Lysandra nods, her scarred cheek twitching slightly.
It's the calm before the storm, Harlan. But we're the storm they never saw coming.
As night envelops Veridius Prime, the soldiers gather in small clusters. Their interactions a mix of camaraderie and tension. Corporal Jackson, Lysandra's second-in-command, joins her, his gaze scanning the horizon.
We're not just fighting a war, Lysandra,
Jackson says, his voice a low rumble.
We're fighting for our very existence.
Lysandra's response is a mere whisper, lost in the howling wind.
And we'll keep fighting, Jackson, until our last breath.
The soldiers share stories, their laughter a temporary balm to the festering wounds of war. Private Cale, the heavy weapons specialist, recounts tales of Caledon IV, their homeworld, his words painting a picture of a life far removed from the horrors of Veridius Prime. But the laughter dies quickly, smothered by the growing sense of unease. Lysandra's eyes never cease moving, always watching, always waiting. The dread grows with each passing moment, a creeping vine in the hearts of the soldiers. In the depths of the trench, Medic Ilara tends to a wounded soldier. Her hands move with practiced ease, but her eyes are clouded with uncertainty.
Will we ever see an end to this, Sergeant?
She asks, her voice barely audible over the soldier's labored breathing. Lysandra crouches beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder.
We may not see the end, Ilara, but we'll fight to make sure others do.
The night deepens, and with it the tension mounts. Lysandra stands watch, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The distant roars of the Tyranids swarm echo in her ears, a grotesque symphony heralding the nightmare to come. In the trenches of Veridius Prime, amidst the whispers of fear and the ghostly echoes of war, Guardsman Lysandra and the 113th Caledon Rangers brace for the onslaught. They stand together, united in their resolve, yet each soldier grapples with their own despair, their own fading hope, for in the heart of the flesh garden hope is but a fleeting shadow, swallowed by the ever-growing darkness. In the oppressive darkness of Veridius Prime, Sergeant Lysandra stands sentinel, her gaze piercing the murky night. The air is thick with the scent of decay, a pungent reminder of the planet's tragic transformation. Around her, the trenches, a maze of despair, echo with the soft murmurs of her squad. The night is unnervingly silent save for the faint, distant roars of the Tyranid swarm, a sinister orchestra heralding doom. Scout Lorne's voice cuts through the silence, his words a whisper in the darkness.
They're coming, aren't they?
Lysandra hears the fear underlying his query. She doesn't respond, her attention fixed on the horizon, where shadows dance in the faint light of distant stars. Trooper Vega, standing nearby, adds, her voice barely above a hush.
The ground, it feels different tonight, like it's alive, waiting.
The soldiers around her nod in silent agreement, their faces etched with dread. Lysandra senses their unease, a growing cancer in the heart of her squad. Suddenly, the earth trembles subtly beneath their feet, a foreboding heartbeat pulsing through the soil. The air grows denser, charged with a palpable sense of impending horror. The subtle vibration intensifies, a morbid lullaby that whispers of the approaching nightmare. In this climactic moment, a distant cacophony shatters the eerie calm. The sound is terrifying, a chaotic symphony of alien shrieks and roars that freezes the squad in fear and anticipation. The noise swells, a tidal wave of sound that washes over them, leaving a residue of dread. Sergeant Lysandra's eyes widen in realization.
Brace yourselves,
She commands, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her heart.
The swarm is upon us.
Her squad, seasoned yet visibly shaken, prepares for the onslaught, their weapons raised in a futile gesture of defiance. The environment around them shifts ominously. The trench walls, once mere earth and metal, now pulsate with a grotesque life of their own, reshaped by the Tyranids' sinister influence. Alien flora, their twisted forms illuminated by the sparse light, seem to lean in, spectators to the impending massacre. In this moment, Lysandra feels an overwhelming sense of despair. The transformation of Veridius Prime from a thriving world to this nightmarish landscape mirrors the change within her own soul. Once a soldier filled with hope, she now stands a guardian of a doomed world, her spirit eroded by the ceaseless war against an unrelenting foe. The distant roar of the Tyranids swarm crescendos, a relentless tide of horror that threatens to engulf them. Lysandra grips her weapon tighter, knowing that the battle ahead is not just for survival, but for the very soul of Veridius Prime. Her squad, a band of brothers and sisters in arms, stands united in the face of despair. Their eyes meet in the dim light, each acknowledging the other's fear and resolve. They are the last line of defense against a threat that seeks to consume not just their bodies, but the essence of their humanity. As the swarm draws nearer, a suffocating sense of inevitability descends upon them. Lysandra knows that the battle they are about to engage in is more than a clash of flesh and blood. It is a fight against the erosion of hope, against the darkness that seeks to swallow the light of their souls. In this moment of grim realization, Sergeant Lysandra stands resolute, a beacon of courage in a world consumed by terror and despair. Her voice, a calm amidst the storm, echoes in the trenches.
Hold the line for the Imperium, for humanity.
Her words, though spoken softly, carry the weight of their grim destiny, a rallying cry in the heart of darkness that is Veridius Prime. Chapter 4. The Onslaught Unleashed. In the inky abyss of Veridius Prime's night, guardsman Lysandra, the lone figure amidst the desolation, raises her eyes to the celestial tapestry above. Stars, distant and indifferent, shimmer like cold, unfeeling eyes peering down at the scarred planet. Lysandra, the once dauntless Sergeant, contemplates the absurdity of their struggle.
Stars.
She murmurs, her voice a ghostly echo in the stillness.
Unwavering, untouchable. What are we to them but fleeting shadows waging wars on a dying world?
Her introspection, a stark contrast to the relentless carnage around her, is a fleeting respite from the horrors of Veridius Prime. But this fleeting peace is shattered as ominous spore clouds, heralds of the Tyranid swarm, begin to converge above. They spread like a malignant shroud, obscuring the celestial bodies and casting the battlefield into an eerie twilight. Lysandra, her reverie broken, watches the phenomenon unfold with a growing sense of dread. Corporal Jackson, his gaze fixed on the darkening sky, approaches Lysandra.
Sergeant, the spores.
He begins, his voice strained.
They're blotting out the stars. It's like the sky itself is turning against us.
Lysandra nods, her eyes not leaving the sky.
It's their way, Jackson. The Tyranids, they don't just invade planets, they consume them body and soul.
Jackson's hand instinctively goes to the laser gun, slung over his shoulder.
And us with it. Seems like there's no end to this war.
The end?
Lysandra's voice takes on a somber tone.
There is no end, Corporal. Only the illusion of an end. Each battle, each victory, it's just a momentary reprieve in an eternal struggle.
Jackson looks at her, his eyes reflecting a mix of fear and resolve.
Then what are we fighting for, Sergeant? If there's no end, no victory.
Lysandra turns to face him, her scarred visage illuminated by the dim light of the spore clouds.
We fight for those moments, Jackson. For those fleeting glimpses of hope, of life. We fight because the alternative...
She pauses, her gaze returning to the dark sky.
The alternative is to succumb to despair, to become like them. Empty, soulless husks driven only by the hive's will.
The silence that follows is heavy, filled with the unspoken truths of war. Around them, the soldiers of the 113th Caledon Rangers brace themselves, their faces etched with the weariness of endless conflict. As the first spores begin to descend, a soft alien whisper seems to permeate the air, a sibilant chorus that sends shivers down Lysandra's spine. It's a sound she's come to know too well, the harbinger of the Tyranid onslaught.
Sergeant?
Jackson's voice is barely audible above the whispers. Lysandra draws her chainsword, its teeth glinting in the dim light.
Prepare the men, Corporal. The storm is upon us.
And in that moment, as the first Tyranid forms emerge from the shadows, Lysandra stands resolute, a beacon of human defiance in the face of an unfathomable terror. The sky above, now a canvas of darkness and spores, reflects the grim reality of their plight. A world consumed, a war unending, and the inescapable embrace of the flesh garden. The miasma of dread permeates the air, thick as the fog rolling over the trenches of Veridius Prime. Guardsman Lysandra, her hazel eyes scanning the mist, feels the weight of impending doom as the alien shrieks of the Tyranid swarm crescendo in the distance. Beside her, Specialist Tira and Private Kyle ready their weapons, their faces set in grim determination.
Brace yourselves.
Lysandra's voice is a steel thread in the murk.
They're coming.
The ground beneath them trembles, a primal rhythm heralding the swarm's approach. Medic Ilara and Engineer Vox check their equipment, a silent prayer whispered between the clicks and clanks. The air is electric, charged with the anticipation of battle, the very essence of the grimdark reality they inhabit. Then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the Tyranids emerge. Chitin and sinew, a mass of alien horror, pour into the trench network. Lysandra's squad opens fire, laser guns spitting death in a desperate attempt to stem the tide. The sound of gunfire melds with the alien shrieks, creating a symphony of terror and defiance.
Keep firing!
Lysandra shouts, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. She fires her bolter relentlessly, each shot finding its mark in the grotesque bodies of the Tyranids. Blood, both human and alien, paints the walls of the trench, a macabre mural of the war's brutality. Tara, her sniper rifle now useless in the close quarters, draws her combat knife, moving with lethal grace. Kyle, the heavy weapons specialist, roars a challenge, his heavy bolter churning through the swarm. Yet for each Tyranid that falls, two more take its place. The combat is unyielding, each moment a desperate struggle for survival. Lysandra feels the burn in her muscles, the acrid taste of fear and adrenaline. She fights back to back with her comrades, their bond forged in the crucible of war. A Tyranid warrior, larger than the rest, breaks through the line. Its scything talons swipe at Lysandra, who barely dodges, feeling the rush of air as the claws pass inches from her face. She counters with a thrust of her chainsword, the teeth of the weapon biting into the alien flesh. Elara, her medic's bag slung over her shoulder, rushes to a fallen trooper, her hand steady as she administers aid amidst the chaos. Vox, meanwhile, hastily rigs a makeshift explosive, buying them precious seconds as it detonates, taking a cluster of Tyranids with it. The battle rages on, the lines between life and death blurred in the frenzied melee. Lysandra's squad fights with a ferocity born of desperation, their every action a testament to their resilience and their unyielding spirit. In a brief lull, Lysandra looks around at her squad, her eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. In their faces, she sees the reflection of her own grim determination, the unspoken understanding that they stand on the precipice of annihilation.
We hold the line.
She says, her voice a rallying cry.
For the Imperium, for humanity.
The battle resumes, the Tyranids surging forward once more. Lysandra and her squad meet them head-on, their defiance a shining beacon in the darkness of the war-torn world. Their fight is not just for survival, but for the soul of Veridius Prime, a planet caught in the grip of a cosmic terror beyond comprehension. As they fight, the subtle horror of their situation sinks in. This is not just a battle, it's a war for existence itself. A war against an enemy that represents the antithesis of everything they stand for. The hopelessness of their plight is palpable, yet they fight on, their courage a small flame flickering in the overwhelming darkness. In this moment, amidst the blood and the horror, Lysandra realizes the true nature of their struggle. It's not just against the Tyranids, but against the creeping despair that threatens to engulf their souls. This realization, both grotesque and subtle, cements her resolve.
We stand together.
She whispers, more to herself than to her squad.
Against the darkness.
And with that, they plunge back into the fray. Their battle a small yet significant defiance against the encroaching terror of the Tyranids, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. Sergeant Lysandra, in the heart of the torn world of Veridius Prime, stands shoulder to shoulder with Corporal Jackson and Trooper Vega. Their gazes fixate on the monstrous Tyranid warrior before them, its chitinous form a grotesque testament to alien horror. The air, thick with the stench of death and the screams of the dying, vibrates with an eerie tension, a prelude to the storm of violence that is about to erupt.
Vega, on my signal.
Jackson's voice cuts through the chaos, his eyes calculating the beast's movements. Vega nods, his heavy bolter gripped tightly, a silent promise of the destruction he is about to unleash. Sergeant Lysandra can feel the rhythm of her heartbeat, a drumming echo in her ears as she readies her chainsword. The warrior, its eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger, seems to mock their efforts, a monstrous spectre of doom. Then, chaos unfolds. Vega's bolter roars to life, spewing a hailstorm of bullets towards the Tyranid. The creature reels, staggering under the ferocious barrage. In that moment of vulnerability, Lysandra charges forward, her chainsword's teeth whirring with a deadly hum. The ground beneath her trembles, mirroring the tumultuous battle that rages around them. As Lysandra closes in, the Tyranid warrior regains its composure, lashing out with razor-sharp talons. But Jackson, ever the tactician, seizes the moment. His grenade launcher thunders, a bright flare of explosive fury that carves an opening in the creature's defenses. Theirs is Sergeant Lysandra's moment. With a warrior's cry, she plunges her chainsword into the beast's exposed underbelly. Ichor spurts out, coating her armor in a grotesque sheen. The creature lets out an ear-piercing shriek, a sound so alien and horrific it chills the soul. But the victory is short-lived. As the Tyranid warrior collapses, a tide of its kin surges over the trench barricades. The air becomes a cacophony of alien shrieks and human screams. The ground, slick with blood and ichor, turns into a grisly quagmire, a canvas of horror painted in the hues of war. Sergeant Lysandra fights on, her chainsword a blur of motion as she cuts through the swarm. Beside her, her squad battles with a ferocity born of desperation and fear. But for every Tyranid that falls, two more take its place, an unending wave of chitin and fangs. The fortifications, once their shield against the onslaught, crumble like sandcastles before the alien tide. Soldiers, trapped beneath the rubble, cry out in terror, their voices abruptly silenced as the Tyranids descend upon them. Amidst this apocalypse, a scene etches itself into Sergeant Lysandra's memory. A young trooper, no more than a boy, frozen in fear, as a lictor emerges from the shadows. Its tendrils ensnare him, lifting him into the air as its maw descends. His screams are cut short, leaving behind a haunting silence that speaks volumes of the Tyranids' merciless nature. As she continues to fight, a profound despair settles in Sergeant Lysandra's heart, tempered only by her unwavering determination. The fall of the Imperial defenses is not just a military defeat, it is a visceral, soul-crushing spectacle of horror and brutality. In the trenches of Veridius Prime, Sergeant Lysandra, her heart heavy with the weight of command, surveys the carnage around her. The air, thick with the stench of blood and alien ichor, hangs oppressively over the battlefield, a macabre testament to the Tyranids' relentless onslaught. Lysandra's gaze drifts to her squad, the 113th Caledon Rangers, each face etched with exhaustion and despair.
Fall back!
Lysandra's voice cuts through the din, a command born of desperation and strategic necessity. The retreat begins in chaos, with Trooper Vega and Trooper Nera leading a contingent through the labyrinthine trenches. The ground beneath them trembles with the advance of the Tyranid swarm, a relentless tide of chitin and fangs. The retreat is fraught with peril. Laser guns blaze, cutting down wave after wave of Tyranids, but the creatures seem endless. In a harrowing moment, a fellow squadmate, Trooper Harlan, the demolitions expert, is caught by a lictor. His screams pierce the air as the creature's barbed tendrils ensnare him. Lysandra watches, powerless, as Harlan is dragged into the shadows, his life extinguished in a gruesome spectacle. Amidst the bedlam, Lysandra's squad navigates the trenches with a grim determination. Trooper Mira, the youngest and most inexperienced, stumbles over the torn remnants of an Imperial soldier, her face a mask of horror. Medic Ilara, her hands stained with blood, offers a fleeting touch of comfort before pushing forward, her resolve unbroken. Finally, the remnants of the 113th reach a temporary safe point, a fortified bunker barely holding against the Tyranid siege. The soldiers collapse against the walls, gasping for breath in the stifling air. Lysandra, her eyes scanning the horizon, sees the extent of the devastation. The once verdant landscape of Veridius Prime is now a desolate wasteland, a haunting reflection of the war's toll on both the planet and its defenders. In the bunker, Lysandra's thoughts turn to the fallen. She remembers Trooper Harlan's boisterous laughter, now forever silenced. Her heart aches for the families that will never see their loved ones again, for the dreams unfulfilled and futures extinguished. The weight of command, the burden of survival presses down on her, a tangible force that threatens to crush her spirit. As the night falls, Lysandra sits alone, her gaze lost in the flickering shadows. The cries of the wounded and the distant roars of the Tyranid swarm form a haunting chorus, a reminder of the unending nightmare. Her mind wanders to the early days of the conflict, the naive hope that they could turn the tide against the alien invaders. That hope has long since faded, replaced by a growing sense of futility and despair. The scorched earth, littered with the bodies of Imperial soldiers and Tyranid creatures, stretches into the horizon. The cries of the wounded and the dying echo in the background, a somber soundtrack to the grim tableau. Sergeant Lysandra stands alone amidst the devastation, her face a portrait of sorrow and exhaustion. Her internal monologue, a blend of doubt and fear, reflects on the dark journey ahead. The Tyranids' presence on Veridius Prime grows ever more dominant, a creeping shadow that threatens to engulf the remaining Imperial forces. The battlefield, now a testament to the horror and brutality of the war, sets the stage for the escalating conflict, a somber reminder of the relentless nature of the Tyranids and the desperation of the Imperial Guard. This is the grim reality of war in the far future, a never-ending struggle against a relentless enemy, where hope is but a fleeting shadow and despair is a constant companion. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. Guardsman Lysandra steps through the shattered remnants of what once was a battlefield on Veridius Prime. Her boots sink into the mud, a sickening blend of earth and blood, as she navigates the mangled maze of trenches. Her gaze, hollow and distant, sweeps across the devastation. The remnants of the once mighty 113th Caledon Rangers are scattered about her, a macabre tapestry woven from the very bowels of despair. The air is thick, not just with the stench of death, but with a palpable sense of loss that clings to every broken barricade and twisted piece of metal. The trench walls, once symbols of defiant resistance, now lay in ruins, their protective embrace reduced to a skeletal mockery. The bodies of Imperial soldiers, her brothers and sisters in arms, lie strewn across the battlefield, their once proud uniforms now sodden with blood and grime. Each fallen comrade is a silent echo of Lysandra's own torment, their lifeless eyes reflecting a story of sacrifice and unyielding courage. As Lysandra trudges forward, her thoughts drift unbidden to the early days of this war. The naive determination that had brought them to Veridius Prime now seems like a distant dream, crushed under the relentless tide of alien horror. The memories of those initial skirmishes, filled with the adrenaline of combat and the camaraderie of her squad, are now overshadowed by the stark reality of their situation. Those memories now seem like fragments of a distant dream, blurred and distorted by the relentless tide of horror that has since washed over them. The trenches reveal more of their ghastly secrets as Lysandra advances. Lysandra's path is obstructed by a young trooper, no older than a conscript, lies crumpled against the earthwork, his face frozen in a silent scream, a grotesque monument to the Tyranids' ferocity. Here, a seasoned veteran, her body torn asunder by the relentless onslaught, clutching a tattered photograph of loved ones she would never see again. There, the remnants of Imperial soldiers, their bodies grotesquely contorted, a testament to the Tyranids' merciless savagery. She pauses beside a fallen comrade, his face frozen in an eternal grimace of agony. His armor, once pristine and proud, is now shattered and stained, the Imperial insignia barely recognizable, under the layers of grime and blood. Her eyes linger on his lifeless form, and for a fleeting moment, Lysandra's stoic facade cracks, revealing a glimpse of the profound sorrow that gnaws at her soul. She crouches beside him, her fingers gently closing his staring eyes. "Rest now, brother," she murmurs, her voice barely a whisper, lost amidst the eerie silence that blankets the battlefield. Everywhere Lysandra looks, the brutal aftermath of the Tyranids' assault is evident. The once imposing fortifications, built with the sweat and blood of the Imperial Guard, have been reduced to rubble. Alien flora, grotesque and otherworldly, creeps over the remains, a sinister testament to the Tyranids' ability to warp and corrupt all they touch. As she rises, Lysandra's gaze falls upon a particularly harrowing scene. A group of her soldiers, caught off guard by a Tyranid ambush, lie in a tangled heap. Their expressions, twisted in horror and disbelief, tell a tale of sudden, violent ends. The ground around them is saturated with a mixture of blood and ichor, a vile slurry that seems to pulse with an unholy life of its own. As she contemplates the grisly tableau, Lysandra's mind grapples with the futility of their struggle. Each death, each moment of terror, chips away at her once unbreakable resolve. The haunting realization that they are not just fighting a physical enemy but also battling for their very humanity against an overwhelming alien force gnaws at her soul. Then her gaze catches a movement in the corner of her eye. A lone figure emerges from the shadows, his uniform marked by the same signs of battle as hers. It's Corporal Jackson, his expression as haunted as her own. They exchange a look, a silent communication born of shared suffering and unspoken understanding.
Anything left to salvage?
Lysandra asks, her voice tinged with a resignation born of countless similar searches. Jackson shakes his head, his eyes scanning the horizon.
"Nothing but memories and ghosts, Sergeant,"
he replies, his voice heavy with the weight of loss. They move together through the wreckage, their conversation a series of terse exchanges, each word laden with the unspoken knowledge of their grim reality. The air is punctuated by the distant cries of the wounded, a haunting symphony that underscores the futility of their struggle. At one point, Lysandra's hand brushes against a piece of shattered chitin, a remnant of the Tyranid horde. She recoils instinctively, a shiver running down her spine. The Tyranids, alien and inscrutable, have become an ever-present shadow in her life, their presence a constant reminder of the war's horrific nature. As they advance, they come across a group of soldiers, their faces etched with exhaustion and despair. The group huddles around a small fire, their eyes reflecting the flame's flickering light. Lysandra and Jackson join them, the warmth a small comfort against the chill of the night. The conversation around the fire is sparse, the soldiers sharing stories of fallen comrades and close encounters with the Tyranids. Each tale is a patchwork of horror and heroism, a narrative tapestry woven from the threads of their shared experiences. Lysandra listens, her mind racing with the implications of each word. The stories are more than just recollections, they are a chronicle of their dwindling hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. As the night deepens, Lysandra finds herself lost in thought, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. The fire's crackling sound seems to echo the whispers of the Tyranids, a sinister undercurrent that tugs at the edges of her consciousness. In this moment, surrounded by her comrades, Lysandra feels an overwhelming sense of isolation. The war has changed them all, stripping away the veneer of normalcy and exposing the raw, unyielding truth of their existence. They are no longer just soldiers, they are survivors, each day a testament to their enduring will to resist the encroaching darkness. The fire eventually dies down, its embers a dim glow against the night's oppressive blackness. Lysandra stands, her silhouette a stark outline against the fading light. She casts one last glance at her comrades, their faces etched with the scars of battle, both physical and emotional. As she turns to leave, her footsteps a soft echo in the stillness. Lysandra knows that this war is far from over. The Tyranids may have claimed Veridius Prime, but they have not yet claimed her spirit. With each step, she reaffirms her resolve to fight, to endure and to survive no matter the cost. In the bleak trenches of Veridius Prime, Guardsman Lysandra stands, her gaze piercing the horizon. The air is thick with the stench of decay, a palpable reminder of the Tyranids' unrelenting assault. Lysandra's eyes, once filled with the fire of determination, now hold a deep weariness, the kind only seen in those who have stared too long into the abyss of war.
Report, Corporal.
Lysandra calls out, her voice barely rising above the howling wind. Corporal Jackson approaches, his face etched with lines of fatigue.
A breach, Sergeant, a few miles north. It's bad.
Lysandra nods, her mind racing. The breach could spell doom for their already dwindling defenses. She gathers her squad, their faces a mix of stoicism and barely concealed fear. As they march towards the breach site, the ground beneath them feels alive, a grotesque reminder of the Tyranids' presence. The breach site is a vision of hell. Bodies, both human and alien, are strewn across the landscape, entangled in a macabre dance of death. Lysandra's stomach churns at the sight, but her expression remains stoic. She's seen too much horror to be easily shaken. A rumble of engines announces the arrival of fresh conscripts. Young, untested faces peer out from the transports, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and naivety. Lysandra watches them disembark, her heart aching for the innocence they are about to lose.
Listen up.
She addresses them.
This isn't a drill, it's not glory, it's survival.
One of the conscripts, a young man barely out of his teens, steps forward.
Sergeant, how do we prepare for what's out there?
Lysandra's gaze softens momentarily.
You don't.
She says quietly.
You adapt, you survive, you keep fighting.
As the new recruits absorb her words, Lysandra's mind drifts to her own first days on Veridius Prime. The flashback is vivid, her stepping onto the planet's surface, filled with a fierce resolve. Now that resolve has been tempered by loss and the unending brutality of war.
Sergeant.
Jackson's voice pulls her back to the present.
We need to fortify this breach.
Lysandra nods, masking her inner turmoil.
Let's move, we don't have much time.
As they set to work, the grotesque reality of their situation becomes increasingly apparent. The ground beneath them squelches unnaturally, a grim reminder of the Tyranids' influence on the planet's very soil. Night falls, casting long shadows over the trenches. Lysandra stands watch, her mind racing with strategies and contingencies. The distant howls of the Tyranids swarm echo across the dark landscape, a sinister lullaby in this theater of horror.
Can we really win this war, Sergeant?
Asks Trooper Naira, her voice tinged with fear. Lysandra looks at her, seeing the reflection of her own once naive self.
We fight, Nira, it's what we do. Victory isn't always about defeating the enemy. Sometimes it's about standing your ground no matter the odds.
The conversation is cut short by a scream. They rush to find a conscript tangled in the encroaching vines burrowing through the trench, his body twisted in unnatural angles, life fading from his eyes. The scene is a stark reminder of the Tyranids' ruthlessness, their disregard for life in its purest form. Lysandra kneels beside the dying soldier, her hand gently closing his eyes.
Rest now, soldier.
She whispers.
You fought well.
The night deepens, the eerie silence punctuated by distant roars. Lysandra's squad huddles together, each lost in their thoughts. The tension is palpable, a heavy cloak of despair and uncertainty. In the flickering light of the trench lanterns, Lysandra pens a letter to her superiors, detailing the situation. Her words are concise, each sentence a testament to the grim reality they face. The war on Veridius Prime isn't just a battle for territory. It's a struggle for the very soul of humanity. As dawn breaks, Lysandra stands, her face a mask of resolve. The horrors of war have left their mark, but she remains unbroken, a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness. Her journey, her transformation from a determined soldier to a hardened survivor, is a grim reflection of the war that has ravaged Veridius Prime. The trenches whisper with the voices of the fallen, a haunting chorus in this garden of flesh and steel. In the dwindling light of Veridius Prime, the landscape stretches before guardsman Lysandra, a testament to the Tyranids' grotesque handiwork. Once familiar flora morphs into alien monstrosities, their twisted forms mocking the planet's former beauty. The air, thick with the scent of decay and despair, clings to Lysandra's skin like a second unwanted armor. Lysandra walks among the survivors, her steps measured, her eyes haunted. Trooper Mira, barely out of adolescence, trembles uncontrollably, her eyes fixed on a distant point, seeing horrors only she can perceive. Trooper Nira, stoically enduring her physical injuries, conceals deeper wounds no medic can heal. Medic Elara moves among them, her hands steady but her eyes betraying a well of sorrow as she administers aid. A battered locket, half buried in the mud, catches Lysandra's eye. She recognizes it instantly. It belonged to Specialist Tira. Lysandra's fingers close around it, a surge of grief washing over her. Each soldier lost is a story ended, a future denied. She pockets the locket, a silent vow to remember. Corporal Jackson approaches, his face etched with fatigue.
Sergeant, we need to plan our next move,
he says, his voice heavy. They gather the squad, a circle of weary souls under a baleful sky. The discussion is a series of hushed, urgent whispers, strategies formed in the face of an unknowable enemy. Lysandra, despite her own exhaustion, steers the conversation, her leadership a faint beacon in the encroaching darkness. Later, atop a hill, Lysandra surveys the battlefield, a panorama of desolation. Her thoughts drift to the war's uncertain future, the survival of humanity on this cursed planet. In the distance, Tyranid structures, sinister and imposing, rise like monuments to an alien will. Their presence sends a shiver down her spine, a silent reminder of the enemy's relentless evolution. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the blighted land, Lysandra's silhouette stands stark against the dying light. Her gaze is fixed on the horizon, a mix of resolve and dread in her eyes. She knows the war is far from over. The next chapter in this nightmarish saga waits, filled with unknown horrors and dwindling hope. In this bleak tableau, subtlety reigns, the quiet horror of a world transformed, the understated bravery of soldiers facing insurmountable odds, and the silent grief for a humanity slowly being eroded by an unrelenting alien tide. Chapter 6. The Subtle Infestation. In the deceptive stillness of the trenches on Veridius Prime, Sergeant Lysandra, her gaze piercing through the murky shadows, discerns an unnerving tranquility that belies the true nature of this alien-infested wasteland. As Lysandra patrols the muddy labyrinth, the soft crunch of her boots against the soil feels almost sacrilegious in the haunting silence. Her hazel eyes, now adept at catching the slightest aberrations, fixate on tiny spores that dance lazily in the air, an invisible threat to the untrained eye but a clear harbinger of doom to her. Lysandra pauses, her senses heightened as she observes vines, grotesquely twisted and alien, crawling like serpents along the trench walls. Unnatural fungal growths, pulsating subtly, emerge from the soil, their presence a silent testament to the Tyranids' insidious conquest of this planet. She reaches out, her fingers hovering inches from the alien flora, the air around them thick with the stench of decay and an unspoken menace.
This is no longer our world.
Lysandra murmurs, her voice barely a whisper, yet heavy with a somber realization. As night descends, the trenches whisper secrets. Lysandra, her ears attuned to the faintest of sounds, overhears her soldiers discussing strange sightings.
Shadows flickering at the edge of vision,
one soldier says, his voice trembling.
And whispers. Always whispers in the night.
Another adds, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. These tales, shared in hushed tones, weave a tapestry of paranoia and dread, painting a picture of a world slipping further into the clutches of a nightmarish reality. The altered environment of Veridius Prime reveals its insidious nature, even in the most mundane aspects of trench life. Lysandra watches, her heart sinking, As a soldier hesitates before taking a sip from his canteen, the water tasting alien, corrupted. Small insect-like Tyranid organisms scuttle through their supplies, a subtle but clear sign of the enemy's pervasive influence.
We're consuming the enemy, even as it consumes us.
Lysandra reflects, her words a chilling acknowledgement of their grim reality. In the midst of this slowly unfolding horror, Lysandra's interactions with her squad members are fraught with an undercurrent of unspoken fear. Long dialogues unfold as they share experiences and speculations about their transformed world. Each word, each shared observation, adds to the growing sense of despair.
Have you noticed the ground?
Corporal Jackson asks one evening, his voice barely above a murmur.
It's softer, as if breathing.
The others nod, their expressions a mixture of agreement and horror. Medic Ilara recounts in excruciating detail how she found a flower with veins that pulsed like a beating heart. Engineer Vox shares his unease about the malfunctioning equipment, suspecting it's being subtly sabotaged by the Tyranid presence. These dialogues, though devoid of action, are rich in their brutality and horror, revealing the psychological toll the war has taken on them. Each word spoken is a testament to their struggle against an enemy that is not just at their gates but is seeping into the very earth they walk on, into the air they breathe, and into their minds. Lysandra, sitting alone in her makeshift quarters, writes in her journal. Her words are a haunting monologue of the day's events, each sentence weaving a narrative of despair and hopelessness.
We are but ghosts in this garden of flesh and nightmares.
She writes, her penmanship shaky. As Lysandra sets down her pen, the silence of the trenches feels heavier, filled with the weight of unspoken fears and the subtle yet unmistakable presence of an alien horror that is slowly, inexorably claiming Veridius Prime and its defenders. In the trenches of Veridius Prime, Sergeant Lysandra of the 113th Caledon Rangers watches the shadows with a wary eye. The air hangs heavy with the stench of decay and a palpable sense of wrongness that seeps into every crevice of this once lush world, now a grotesque garden of alien horrors. The trench walls, overgrown with sinister Tyranid flora, seem to pulsate with a life of their own, casting eerie, shifting patterns in the dim light. Sergeant Lysandra's gaze shifts to Trooper Mira, the newest member of her squad, who nervously fingers her laser gun. The sense of impending dread is almost tangible, suffocating in its intensity. The eerie stillness of the environment is periodically shattered by the distant guttural roars of Tyranid creatures, a constant reminder of the lurking threat. In the claustrophobic confines of the trench, a subtle, unsettling shift occurs as Private Kyle, the heavy weapons specialist, begins to tremble. The tremors are barely perceptible at first, but they quickly intensify, his body contorting in ways that defy human physiology. His squad mates exchange uneasy glances, a sense of foreboding hanging thick in the air. Sergeant Lysandra's eyes narrow, fixating on Private Kyle. The man's skin starts to ripple oddly, veins bulging and pulsating beneath the surface, with an unnatural rhythm. His eyes, once clear, now glaze over with an alien sheen, the irises swirling in a pattern that is disturbingly non-human. The squad, frozen in a mix of horror and disbelief, watches as Private Kyle's transformation becomes more grotesque. His fingers, twitching uncontrollably, begin to elongate, the nails morphing into sharp, claw-like protrusions. It's a slow, horrifying spectacle of the Tyranids' insidious corruption of the human form. Without warning, Private Kyle lashes out, his movements swift and violent. Trooper Vega, standing closest to him, receives a gash across her arm, blood spurting in a dark arc. The squad reacts instinctively, but Private Kyle's newfound strength and speed make him a formidable foe. Sergeant Lysandra and Corporal Jackson spring into action, attempting to subdue Private Kyle. The struggle is brutal and chaotic, Private Kyle's altered form granting him a terrifying advantage. His roars, a blend of human agony and something otherworldly, echo through the trench, a chilling soundtrack to the struggle. In the melee, Private Kyle's claw finds its mark on Trooper Nira, her scream piercing the air as she falls, a grievous wound across her torso. The sight of their comrade gravely injured fuels the squad's desperation. Medic Ilara rushes to Nira's side, her medical training kicking in despite the shock and horror of the situation. Her hands work quickly, trying to stem the bleeding, her expression one of grim determination. The battle to restrain Private Cale reaches its climax as Sergeant Lysandra, with a surge of strength born of desperation, manages to pin him to the ground. Corporal Jackson joins her, his face set in a grim mask, as they work together to bind Cale's thrashing limbs. Amidst the chaos, Trooper Wren, the squad's scout sniper, moves to assist, but in a tragic twist, Private Cale's flailing claw catches him unawares, striking with lethal precision. Wren collapses, lifeless, a stark reminder of the Tyranids' merciless nature. The squad, now subdued and shaken, encircles the restrained form of Private Cale. His transformation is almost complete, his humanity slipping away beneath the Tyranid corruption. Sergeant Lysandra stands over him, her face a mask of sorrow and resolve.
We need to report this,
Corporal Jackson states, his voice steady but tinged with a sense of deep loss.
The enemy is not just at our gates, it's within us.
As they process the horrific turn of events, Sergeant Lysandra feels a profound sense of despair. The mutation of Private Cale symbolizes the insidious nature of their foe, an enemy that seeks to annihilate not just their bodies, but their very essence. In a moment of solitude, Sergeant Lysandra reflects on the grim reality they face. The war against the Tyranids is a battle for their souls, a fight against an enemy that corrupts and transforms them into grotesque parodies of their former selves. Standing in the dim light of the trench, surrounded by the eerie sounds of Veridius Prime, Sergeant Lysandra braces herself for the challenges ahead. The mutation incident has opened her eyes to a new level of horror, one that will test her resolve and that of her squad in unimaginable ways. The air of Veridius Prime hangs heavy with a menacing stillness, like the calm before a tempest. Guardsman Lysandra, her eyes accustomed to the perpetual twilight that shrouds the trenches, moves with a practiced silence alongside Scout Lorne. They thread through the labyrinthine network, a ballet of shadows amidst the twisted metal and earth.
See this?
Lorne points to a peculiar growth, its tendrils coiling around a rusted artillery shell. The plant, a grotesque parody of nature, pulsates with a sickly glow. Lysandra leans closer, her hazel eyes reflecting the eerie luminescence.
It's as if the planet itself is mutating, succumbing to the Tyranid corruption.
The patrol continues, their boots muffled against the damp soil. The walls of the trenches, once mere earth and timber, now resemble the interior of some gargantuan beast, organic and alive. Lysandra brushes her hand against a wall, recoiling as it quivers under her touch.
Every day this war takes more of us, and more of Veridius Prime.
Lorne mutters, his voice a mere whisper, yet laden with an unsettling certainty. The pair pauses at an intersection, the silence around them oppressive. Lysandra's gaze falls on a group of soldiers huddled together, their conversations hushed, eyes darting nervously. The war has etched lines of fear and fatigue onto their young faces.
It's not just the Tyranids out there.
She overhears one of them say,
"What's in the air, in the ground? It's changing us."
Lysandra feels a shiver run down her spine, a creeping realization that their enemy is far more insidious than mere beasts of flesh and chitin. As they return to the main trench, the atmosphere is thick with tension, a palpable sense of impending doom.
We're not just fighting for ground.
Lysandra addresses her squad later, her voice steady yet tinged with an undeniable gravity.
We're fighting against an invasion that seeks to warp our very world, to turn it against us.
Lysandra's voice carries a grave undertone.
Our battle is not just for territory. We're fighting against an invasion that seeks to twist Veridius Prime, to turn our very world against us.
Medica Lara speaks up, her words heavy with fear.
The injuries I've treated, the flesh resists healing. It's as if it's not entirely human anymore.
Her revelation hangs ominously in the air. Lysandra surveys her squad, her gaze lingering on the empty space where Private Cale once stood, a stark reminder of the war's cruel transformations.
We must guard not only against the external enemy, but also against the changes within ourselves. We cannot allow this planet, or us, to be consumed by their hive.
The meeting ends in silence, heavy with unspoken fears. Lysandra stares out over the trenches, her eyes drawn to the distant Tyranid structures. They stand as nightmarish monoliths on the horizon, symbols of the relentless horror encroaching upon them. In her quarters, Lysandra gazes into a small tarnished mirror. Her reflection is marred by war, both physically and internally. Outside, the distant roars of Tyranids blend with the planet's mournful whispers, a chorus foretelling unending darkness. A sudden movement in the shadows jolts Lysandra back to the present. She grips her weapon tightly, her eyes scanning the darkness. The familiar shapes of her squad are barely discernible, their forms distorted by the shifting terrain.
Who's there?
She calls out, her voice echoing in the trench. No answer comes, only the whispering wind and the distant cries of the Tyranid swarm. Lysandra feels a chill run down her spine as she realizes the enemy is no longer just at the gates. They are within the walls, within her mind. As she descends back into the trenches, her steps are resolute, yet her heart is heavy with the knowledge of the transformation within and around her. Chapter 7. The Impending Storm. In the eerie silence atop the crumbling parapet of Veridius Prime, Guardsman Lysandra stands, her hazel eyes scanning the horizon. The sky, a canvas of bleak greys, reflects the somber mood of the 113th Caledon Rangers. Corporal Jackson, his face etched with lines of unspoken fears, stands beside her, his gaze equally distant. Lorne, once a beacon of youthful energy, now mirrors the desolation around them. The air is thick with anticipation, a silent prelude to the storm that is to come. As Guardsman Lysandra looks out, the stillness is deceptive, a momentary respite in the relentless horror of war.
Do you see it, Jackson?
Lysandra's voice is a hollow whisper, barely audible over the gentle whistle of the wind. Jackson, turning towards her, nods slowly.
It's like the world is holding its breath, Lysandra, waiting for the end to begin.
In the distance, the horizon shifts, transforming into a horrifying spectacle. The Tyranid horde appears, a monstrous tide of chitin and flesh. Their silhouettes paint a nightmarish scene against the darkening sky, a grotesque tapestry that turns day into a chilling eclipse. Lysandra's narration, internal and fraught with despair, echoes in her mind.
We stand at the brink, witnessing the final act of this tragedy. This world, once vibrant and full of life, now reduced to a playground for monstrosities.
Corporal Jackson, his stoicism beginning to crack, looks back at the remaining members of their squad. Naira, clutching her wounded torso, tries to mask her pain with a brave smile. Vega, his arm bandaged, leans against the trench wall, his usual bravado dimmed by the visible strain.
We've lost so much.
Naira murmurs, her voice a fragile thread.
Tira, Harlan, Ren, and now this.
Vega's response is a low, bitter chuckle.
What's left for us, huh? Fighting till we're part of this damn planet's grotesque scenery.
Lysandra's gaze returns to the horizon. The Tyranid swarm advances, an unstoppable force of nature. Their alien cries a discordant symphony of doom. The sight is overwhelming, a visceral reminder of their impending doom. Lorne, standing a little apart, his youthful face now marred by the scars of war, speaks up, his voice unsteady.
Do you think there's any hope for us, Sergeant?
Lysandra turns to him, her eyes reflecting a depth of sorrow.
Hope is a luxury on the battlefield, Lorne. But we fight not for hope, but for each other, for the memories of those who have fallen.
As the sky darkens further, the oppressive atmosphere of Veridius Prime grows heavier. Lysandra feels a profound sadness envelop her, a mourning for the world they knew, for the lives they once had. The transformation of the planet into a Tyranid hive, the subtle corruption of its very essence, mirrors the transformation within each of them. No longer just soldiers, they are remnants of humanity, fighting a losing battle against an enemy that is both outside and within. In this moment of quiet despair, Lysandra's thoughts turn inward. She recalls her early days on Veridius Prime, the naive belief in victory and glory. Now, all that remains is the grim reality of their situation, a war that has consumed their world, their lives, and their very being. Guardsman Lysandra's gaze fixed on the advancing horde, her expression a mix of resignation and quiet defiance. Around her, the remaining members of her squad prepare for the inevitable, each lost in their own thoughts of dread and sorrow. The haunting image of the Tyranid swarm, a relentless force of nature, encapsulates the grim reality of their fate. Veridius Prime, once a symbol of imperial might, now stands on the brink of annihilation, its defenders facing a foe that is as much a part of the planet as they are. In the growing darkness, Guardsman Lysandra's voice is barely a whisper, a solemn testament to their plight.
This is our reality now. A world transformed, a battlefield warped. We stand at the edge of despair, fighting not just for survival, but for the remnants of our humanity.
Guardsman Lysandra, sergeant of the 113th Caledon Rangers, stands atop a battered parapet, overlooking the trenches of Veridius Prime. Her hazel eyes, once vibrant with determination, now flicker with a somber weariness. The acrid stench of burning flesh fills the air, a grim reminder of the relentless war against the Tyranid swarm.
To your positions.
Lysandra commands, her voice a blend of authority and resignation. Her squad, battered yet resolute, takes their places along the trench line. The sky above roars with the arrival of Imperial bombers, casting ominous shadows across the scarred battlefield. Their engines scream a death knell as firebombs rain down upon the no-man's land, where Imperial soldiers and Tyranids clash in a maelstrom of violence. Sergeant Lysandra's fingers tighten around her laser gun, as a crackling voice erupts from the Voxcaster, breaking the eerie calm that had settled over her section of the trench.
Alpha and Delta companies prepare for countercharge on my mark.
The voice, stern and resolute, belongs to Captain Argus, known for his valiant yet often reckless strategies. Lysandra's squad exchanges glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They are to hold their position, a bulwark against the tide, while their comrades prepare to surge into the abyss.
3, 2, 1, charge.
Captain Argus's command echoes through the Vox, a clarion call to war. In an instant, the distant trenches erupt in a frenzied blur of movement. Thousands of Imperial soldiers, a sea of blue and grey, surge forward with a chorus of battle cries, their determination palpable even from Lysandra's distant vantage point. The ground trembles under the weight of their charge, a human wave crashing against the alien shore. The air fills with the sounds of gunfire, chain swords, and the primal roars of the tyrannic swarm. Lysandra watches, her heart in her throat, as the first line of soldiers collides with the Tyranid front. The clash is brutal, immediate, and horrific. The Tyranids, a grotesque amalgamation of chitin and sinew, meet the soldiers with a ferocity that is otherworldly. The battle turns into a slaughter within moments. The Tyranids, unyielding and insatiable, tear through the Imperial ranks with terrifying efficiency. Limbs and bodies are flung into the air, torn asunder by the relentless onslaught. The sky, darkened by the smoke of bombardment, roars as Imperial bombers unleash their payload onto the battlefield. Fire and brimstone rain down, engulfing both human and Tyranid alike. The ground becomes an inferno, a Dantean landscape of unending torment. Lysandra's eyes widen in horror as she witnesses scenes that sear themselves into her memory. Soldiers, her comrades aflame, stagger back towards the trenches, their screams rending the air. Some fall and are trampled underfoot by their own retreating comrades. Others reach the trench only to collapse, their bodies charred beyond recognition. The air is thick with the stench of burning flesh, a nauseating miasma that blankets the battlefield. The Tyranids, undeterred by the flames, continue their advance, their alien forms silhouetted against the firestorm, a nightmarish tableau of death and destruction. Lysandra's squad stands frozen, witnessing the annihilation. Trooper Mira, her face pale, murmurs a prayer to the Emperor, her voice a whisper lost in the cacophony of war.
Keep your focus.
Lysandra manages, her voice a strained whisper.
We hold the line no matter what.
But the words sound hollow, even to her. The countercharge, meant to be a display of Imperial might, has devolved into a ghastly spectacle of despair. The bravery and sacrifice of thousands, reduced to mere footnotes in the endless saga of this war. As the bombardment ceases, leaving behind a charred wasteland littered with the dead and dying, Lysandra knows that this was more than a military defeat. It was a testament to the futility of their struggle against a relentless, unfeeling enemy. In the trenches, surrounded by the remnants of their once proud force, Lysandra and her squad brace for the Tyranids' continued assault, their spirits shattered, their hearts heavy with a loss that is both deeply personal and overwhelmingly vast. In the smouldering aftermath of the bombardment, Sergeant Lysandra's eyes sweep across the wasteland, where the Tyranids, like an unstoppable force of nature, begin their terrifying counterattack. The ground beneath her feet vibrates with the approach of the alien swarm, a menacing rumble that heralds an onslaught beyond any human comprehension.
Brace yourselves.
Lysandra's voice is a calm amidst the storm, her eyes locking onto the advancing horde.
This is the moment we stand firm.
The sky darkens ominously as winged Tyranid leviathans, monstrous creatures with grotesque, chitinous bodies and leathery wings, descend from the clouds. Their screeches, piercing and alien, drown out the sounds of gunfire and explosions, instilling a primal fear in the hearts of the soldiers. Corporal Jackson, his face a mask of terror and awe, shouts over the chaos.
Incoming from above, get to cover.
Lysandra, her heart pounding in her chest, watches as the leviathans swoop down, their massive talons extended like the fingers of death itself. They snatch Imperial soldiers from the ground, lifting them into the air amidst screams of terror and despair.
The Emperor protect us,
whispers Trooper Mira, her eyes wide with fear. Lysandra, gripping her weapon tightly, aims and fires at a diving leviathan. Her bullets ping harmlessly off its thick hide, a futile gesture against such a formidable foe. The sky becomes a chaotic battlefield, with Imperial aircraft desperately engaging the aerial nightmares. Explosions bloom in the air, a futile attempt to stem the tide of the Tyranid advance. On the ground, the Tyranids' hulking warriors charge forward, their alien forms a blur of chitin and fangs. Lysandra realizes with a sinking heart that this battle has escalated beyond their worst fears.
Squad, focus fire, target the joints.
She commands, firing round after round into the advancing swarm. Trooper Naira, wounded across her torso, grimaces in pain but continues to fire her weapon with unyielding determination. Beside her, Trooper Vega, his arm bandaged and bloodied, unleashes a barrage of gunfire, his face etched with a mix of rage and fear. The trench is filled with the cacophony of war, the air thick with the stench of blood and ichor. The soldiers' faces are smeared with dirt and sweat, their expressions a mixture of determination and despair. Lysandra, leading her squad with a ferocity born of desperation, cuts down Tyranid after Tyranid. Her chainsword whirs through the air, slicing through alien flesh with every swing.
Push them back!
She yells, her voice barely audible over the roar of battle. But for every Tyranid they fell, two more take its place, a relentless wave of death that seems to have no end. Lysandra, standing amidst the bodies of fallen comrades and enemies alike, gazes out over the battlefield. Her face, illuminated by the flickering flames of the ruined landscape, is a mask of resolve and sorrow.
We endure,
she whispers to herself, a mantra against the overwhelming sense of doom.
For the Emperor we endure.
In the trenches of Veridius Prime, Guardsman Lysandra stands, her heart pounding in her chest. The air reeks of blood and ichor, a pungent reminder of the unending war against the Tyranids. Lysandra's hazel eyes, once filled with a spark of hope, now reflect only the grim resolve of a soldier who has seen too much. Beside her, Medic Ilara, her face etched with concentration and fear, transforms her medkit into a makeshift shield. Her pistol, usually a last resort, now barks in steady rhythm, cutting down the advancing Tyranid horrors. With swift movements, Ilara switches between firing and administering aid to a wounded trooper, her hands steady despite the chaos. Engineer Vox, covered in grime and blood, works feverishly to create makeshift barriers against the swarm. His gadgets, a blend of Imperial ingenuity and desperation, explode amidst the Tyranid drones, buying precious moments for the beleaguered defenders.
Keep firing, hold the line!
Lysandra yells over the din of battle, her voice a beacon of command amidst despair. Her bolter roars a rhythmic thunder against the alien screech. A Tyranid beast, all teeth and claws, lunges at her. In a display of lethal grace, Lysandra sidesteps, her combat knife plunging into its underbelly. She withdraws the blade just in time to unload a barrage of gunfire into another encroaching monstrosity. The trench, once a symbol of Imperial defiance, has transformed into a gruesome tableau of death. Blood and alien ichor mix in a grotesque dance, painting the muddy ground in shades of red and black. But the onslaught does not relent. As Lysandra, Ilara and Vox battle with unyielding ferocity, the once steadfast Imperial line begins to falter. The trenches, those narrow corridors of mud and blood, become a labyrinthine nightmare. Guardsman Lysandra, her senses heightened in the midst of chaos, suddenly hears a different kind of scream, one that chills her to the bone. She turns just in time to see Trooper Vega, previously injured but unyielding, now caught in the deadly grasp of a Tyranid warrior. This behemoth, a grotesque fusion of chitin and sinew, towers over the battlefield, its scything claws glistening with the blood of fallen comrades. Trooper Vega, a soldier as fierce as he is loyal, fights back with a primal ferocity, his laser gun blazing until it clicks empty, but his bravery stands little chance against the monstrous Tyranid. In a moment that seems to stretch into eternity, the Tyranid warrior lifts Vega off the ground. The soldier's struggles only seem to intrigue the creature, its alien eyes gleaming with a predatory interest. With a sudden, horrific movement, the Tyranid's massive claw impales Vega, lifting him high for a brief, excruciating moment as if displaying a trophy. Lysandra, her heart pounding in horror and rage, fires at the beast, but her bullets merely chip off pieces of its thick carapace. Around her, the din of battle continues, but in that moment her focus narrows to the sight of her comrade in the clutches of the enemy. Vega, impaled and bleeding profusely, locks eyes with Lysandra. His gaze, a mix of pain and silent farewell, sears into her memory, a haunting, wordless goodbye. Then, with a grotesque sound of tearing flesh, the Tyranid warrior rends Vega apart. His upper body falls to the ground with a sickening thud, while the creature callously discards the lower half. The trench, already a macabre scene of death, now witnesses a new level of horror. Vega's remains, once a symbol of human defiance, lie in a twisted heap, a gruesome testament to the Tyranid's merciless nature. Lysandra, her face smeared with the blood and dirt of war, feels a surge of despair. Vega's death, brutal and senseless, epitomizes the futility of their struggle. Lysandra's gaze falls upon a group of soldiers, cornered by a Tyranid ravener. The beast's scything talons descend in a macabre dance of death. Gunfire does little to halt its relentless slaughter. The trenches have become a gallery of horror. Bodies of Imperial soldiers, some still twitching in death's embrace, others mutilated beyond recognition. The walls, once a storeroom of ammunition and hope, now display the grisly remains of the fallen. In this charnel pit, Lysandra realizes the grim truth. This is no longer a battlefield, it is a slaughterhouse for the Tyranid hive. Each moment, a struggle for survival against an enemy devoid of mercy or fear. A sense of despair settles in Lysandra's heart, a stone weighing down her soul. This war, this endless struggle against the Tyranids, has become a desperate fight for survival. As Lysandra fires her bolter, each shot a defiance against the inevitable. She knows this truth. They are not soldiers fighting a war, they are prey fighting for their very existence in the grotesque garden of the Tyranids. The trenches of Veridius Prime, a once lush world now a grotesque labyrinth of mud, metal and alien monstrosities, offer no sanctuary. Sergeant Lysandra, her senses sharpened by years of brutal conflict, watches as the Tyranid swarm engulfs the horizon. The sky, choked with spores, casts a pall over the trench network, a network now more akin to open graves than strategic defenses. Amidst the stench of death and decay, an unspeakable transformation unfolds. Trooper Silas, once a steadfast member of Sergeant Lysandra's squad, now writhes on the muddy ground, his body undergoing a grotesque metamorphosis under the Tyranid's sinister influence. Sergeant Lysandra, her eyes wide with a mix of horror and disbelief, watches as Trooper Silas's limbs contort unnaturally, elongating and twisting into something alien. His skin ripples, taking on a chitinous sheen, as if his very flesh rebels against its human origins.
Emperor preserve us.
Trooper Mira whispers, her voice barely audible over the sounds of distant artillery. Sergeant Lysandra's gaze remains fixed on the horrific spectacle. She orders, her voice steady despite the growing dread in her heart. Trooper Silas's screams morph into guttural, otherworldly hisses, a haunting chorus that chills the soul. The transformation isn't immediate, but insidious, a creeping corruption that distorts his humanity bit by bit. Engineer Vox, his usual humor extinguished by the grotesque scene, clutches his demolition charges, his hands trembling.
Sarge, what are we going to do?
We do what we must.
Sergeant Lysandra replies, her hand gripping the hilt of her power sword.
We can't let him suffer like this.
As the transformed Trooper Silas staggers to his feet, his movements betray an eerie, serpentine grace. His once familiar face is now a nightmarish visage, a mockery of the soldier he once was. Sergeant Lysandra steps forward,
her chainsword revving, casting an ominous glint in the dim trench.
Silas, forgive us.
She murmurs, a prayer lost in the cacophony of war. The battle that ensues is a tragic dance of former comrades. Trooper Silas, or the creature he has become, lunges with unnatural speed, his new Tyranid appendages slicing through the air. Sergeant Lysandra parries and counters, each movement a blend of precision and sorrow. Trooper Mira and Engineer Vox provide covering fire, their shots strategically aimed to hinder the creature's advance. The confined space of the trench amplifies the brutality of the confrontation, each clash echoing off the mud-soaked walls.
And this isn't you, Silas.
Sergeant Lysandra shouts over the din of combat, her blade clashing against the chitinous armor of the transformed trooper.
You're one of us, not this abomination.
But the creature that was once Trooper Silas shows no sign of recognition, its actions driven by the Tyranid's hive mind. Its alien shrieks fill the trench, a sound that embodies the horror of their reality. The fight is a desperate struggle. A battle not just for survival, but for the memory of the man Trooper Silas once was. With each passing moment, the remnants of his humanity slip further away, consumed by the Tyranid corruption. In a final, heartbreaking moment, Sergeant Lysandra finds an opening.
Her chainsword arcs through the air.
A flash of light in the darkness, and finds its mark. The creature that was once Trooper Silas falls, its body collapsing into the mud with a haunting finality. As they regroup, the squad barely has a moment to process the horror of their actions. The trench remains a maelstrom of death and destruction, the war showing no signs of respite.
We did what we had to.
Sergeant Lysandra says, her voice cutting through the chaos.
Remember, in this war our choices are grim necessities.
The squad presses on, their faces etched with the scars of battle and loss. The memory of Trooper Silas's fall serves as a grim reminder of their own vulnerability in this relentless conflict. The Tyranid swarm, a grotesque tide of chitin and fangs, surges forward, an unstoppable force of alien brutality. Sergeant Lysandra's heart pounds fiercely in her chest, each beat a drum of war in this nightmarish symphony. Her eyes, sharp and focused, scan the battlefield, a hellish landscape wrought by the Tyranid onslaught. The air, thick with the stench of death and burning flesh, clings to her lungs, a tangible reminder of the war's grotesque reality.
Fall back, regroup at Rally Point Delta.
Sergeant Lysandra's voice cuts through the cacophony, a beacon amidst the chaos. Her squad, battered and diminished, responds with a mix of desperation and resolve. They move, a cohesive unit in retreat, through the labyrinth of trenches. The ground trembles beneath them, the Tyranids relentless in their pursuit. The sudden roar of engines overhead heralds an unforeseen reprieve. Imperial aircraft, their hulls emblazoned with the proud insignia of the Guard, descend like avenging angels. Their arrival, a blend of hope and terror, signals a turning tide. Explosions blossom across the battlefield, a rain of fire and fury from the skies. The Tyranids falter, their swarm momentarily broken by the aerial onslaught. Sergeant Lysandra watches, her heart a mix of horror and awe, as the Imperial might carves a temporary safe zone amidst the alien horde. Her squad, seizing the opportunity, regroups. They tend to their wounds, each bandage and balm a silent testament to their survival. The air, now thick with the scent of burning Tyranid flesh, offers a macabre relief from the relentless assault. As the aircraft retreat, a haunting silence descends. The Tyranids, though reduced, begin to regroup, their hive mind adapting to the new threat. Sergeant Lysandra, her resolve unwavering, leads her squad through the trenches. Their retreat is strategic, a maneuver to regather and reassess, yet each step weighs heavy with the knowledge that the war is far from over. Emerging from the debris, Sergeant Lysandra surveys the aftermath. The battlefield, a scorched wasteland, echoes with the cries of the wounded and dying. The ground, littered with the remnants of both friend and foe, tells a tale of brutal conflict and grim survival. In the solitude of her quarters, Sergeant Lysandra reflects on the battle. Her journal, a chronicle of war's grim reality, receives her thoughts, a blend of sorrow, exhaustion, and unyielding determination. The cost of their survival, etched in the lines of her face and the scars on her skin, is a burden she carries with an unwavering sense of duty. Her gaze drifts to the mirror, her reflection a stark reminder of the transformation within. The subtle changes, a product of prolonged exposure to the Tyranid-altered environment, are both physical and psychological. Her eyes, once a vivid hazel, now carry a depth that speaks of her evolving connection to the enemy she battles. In the shadowed trenches of Veridius Prime, Guardsman Lysandra stands, her armor a testament to battles endured. The azure sky, now cloaked in a pallid shroud of spores, whispers of the world's transformation. The horizon, once a familiar landmark, stretches as a desolate tableau of war's ruin. Lysandra's gaze, sharpened by years of conflict, notices the subtle alterations around her. The trenches, symbols of imperial resilience, now betray an alien influence. The earth underfoot feels alive, infused with an otherworldly essence shifting in color to an unnatural hue. Tiny fungal growths, mimicking the Tyranid bioforms, emerge from the trench walls, blurring into the backdrop of war's desolation. A sense of foreboding takes root in Lysandra's heart. The air around her, charged with latent energy, carries the faint hum of the Tyranid hive, a dissonant melody that speaks to the planet's gradual assimilation. It's a change not just in the world but within herself, Unbeknownst to Lysandra, faint patterns begin to etch into her skin, echoing the Tyranid bioforms surrounding her. Her senses, already honed by war, sharpen further, attuning to the eerie symphony of the changing world.
Something's not right.
Lysandra mutters, her voice barely a whisper against the howling winds. She turns to Trooper Mira, the youngest of her squad, who lies beside her, clutching a wound across her torso.
Everything's changed, Sergeant.
Mira gasps, her eyes wide with pain and fear.
It's like the planet. It's alive.
Lysandra nods grimly, her mind racing. The transformation of Veridius Prime is more than just a physical metamorphosis. It's an invasion that permeates the very essence of everything it touches.
Stay with me, Mira. We're getting out of this.
Lysandra reassures her, but the hollowness in her own voice betrays her uncertainty. As night descends, a sense of isolation envelops Lysandra. Her comrades, once a source of strength, now seem distant, their faces shadowed and unfamiliar under the dim light of the trench lamps. The laughter and camaraderie of the past feel like distant memories, replaced by a growing chasm of alienation. Alone with her thoughts, Guardsman Lysandra contemplates the daunting path ahead. The conflict has evolved into a struggle to maintain their humanity against an enemy that devours everything: their land, their bodies, their minds. Lysandra's thoughts drift to Tira, Kale, Harlan, and the others lost or transformed beyond recognition. Each memory cuts like a blade, a reminder of the war's relentless cruelty. The once clear line between human and alien blurs, leaving Lysandra adrift in a sea of uncertainty. A sudden movement in the shadows jolts Lysandra back to the present. She grips her weapon tightly, her eyes scanning the darkness. The familiar shapes of her squad are barely discernible, their forms distorted by the shifting terrain. As she prepares for rest, her mind haunted by the day's grim realizations, Lysandra's final conscious thought acknowledges the profound toll of this war. It's a conflict not only against the Tyranids, but against the very essence of Veridius Prime, a world she fears is irrevocably lost to the encroaching hive. Chapter 8. The Whispering Changes. Guardsman Lysandra treads cautiously through the labyrinthine trenches of Veridius Prime, her hazel eyes scanning the shadows. The rustling of alien leaves and the subtle skittering in the dark are alarmingly clear to her enhanced senses. Each sound, each movement holds a potential threat, a hidden adversary. The planet, a grotesque tapestry of war and alien invasion, pulses with a life of its own, a life both beautiful and terrifying. Pausing by a cluster of bizarre flora, Lysandra's gaze lingers on their intricate patterns. These plants, unlike anything from her homeworld, are captivating in their alien strangeness. The petals shimmer with an iridescent glow, veins pulsating gently as if breathing. Lysandra reaches out, her fingers hovering just above the surface, feeling a strange pull, a connection that both intrigues and unsettles her.
Something on your mind, Sarge?
Corporal Jackson's voice cuts through her reverie. He and Trooper Mira watch her with concern. Lysandra withdraws her hand, masking her fascination.
Just assessing the terrain.
Lysandra replies, her voice steady. Jackson nods, but his eyes filled with unspoken questions linger on her. In the solitude of her quarters, Lysandra examines her reflection in a shard of polished metal. Her external appearance is unchanged, but there's something different, a feeling, an internal shift that defies explanation. Her skin seems too smooth, too perfect, as if subtly altered by an unseen hand. She probes her face, searching for tangible signs of transformation, but finds none. That night, as Lysandra lies in her bunk, the silence is broken by whispers, faint and indecipherable. They ebb and flow like a distant tide, a language unknown yet eerily familiar. She tries to dismiss them as echoes of her mind, but they persist, insistent and invasive. Her newfound clarity in the darkness is both a boon and a curse. As she navigates the trenches, her vision pierces the night, revealing figures and movements hidden to others. This heightened awareness isolates her from her comrades, setting her apart in a world that grows increasingly alien. Around the campfire, Lysandra's mind drifts from the conversations. Her comrades' laughter and banter sound distant, their faces blurred and indistinct. She feels a growing chasm between them, an isolation that she cannot bridge. An internal struggle rages within her. Lysandra senses a battle for her very soul, torn between her human identity and an otherworldly influence. It's a conflict that unfolds in the deepest recesses of her being, unseen yet palpable. Her sleep is disturbed by vivid, unsettling dreams. She envisions sprawling organic structures, their roots entwining with her flesh. The sensation of being drawn into the earth, becoming one with Veridius Prime, leaves her waking in cold sweat. Lysandra stands alone, a solitary figure against the backdrop of a world transformed. The whispers continue, a constant undercurrent in her mind, hinting at the profound changes taking root within her. The lines between human and alien blur, leaving her standing on the brink of an abyss, one that threatens to consume not just her body but her very essence. Dawn breaks over the trenches of Veridius Prime, casting an eerie light on the war-ravaged landscape. Sergeant Lysandra, leader of the 113th Caledon Rangers, strides through the muddy trenches, her boots sinking into the soft, alien-infused earth. The air is thick with the scent of decay and the distant echoes of alien shrieks. Each step Lysandra takes is heavy, not just with the weight of her gear, but with the burden of command and the loss of so many under her lead. As the first rays of sunlight filter through the spore-laden atmosphere, Lysandra's patrol brings her face to face with an unsettling sight. A small creature, unmistakably Tyranid in origin, blocks her path. Its chitinous skin glistens in the dawnlight, and its many-faceted eyes lock onto Lysandra's. There is no immediate aggression from the creature, only a strange, silent acknowledgement, a fleeting connection that sends a shiver down Lysandra's spine. She feels an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if recognizing a part of herself within this alien being. The moment passes, and the creature scuttles away, disappearing into the twisted undergrowth. Lysandra shakes off the eerie sensation, but the encounter leaves a lingering sense of unease. She can't help but wonder about the changes occurring within her, the subtle alterations in her perception and instincts. The thought is quickly pushed aside as duty calls. Later, during a skirmish against a Tyranid scouting party, Lysandra's combat skills are put to the test. Her movements are fluid, almost unnatural in their precision and speed. She moves through the battlefield with an eerie grace, her lasgun firing in perfect rhythm with her steps. The members of her squad watch in awe and slight unease. Lysandra's combat style, while effective, is unlike anything they've seen before. It's as if she's tapping into some newfound instinctual knowledge. The battle is brutal and swift, with Lysandra leading her squad with a ferocity that borders on the primal. The Tyranids fall one after another, their alien blood staining the earth. As the smoke clears and the last of the enemy is dispatched, Lysandra stands amidst the carnage, her breathing heavy. She looks down at the strewn Tyranid corpses, a profound realization dawning upon her. She feels a deep, almost spiritual connection with the Tyranid essence that now permeates the very soil of Veridius Prime. Guardsman Lysandra is profoundly altered, both mentally and physically, by her experiences on the front lines of Veridius Prime. The eerie, alien whispers that have begun to permeate her consciousness are not merely figments of her imagination, but harbingers of a deep, irrevocable transformation. A once familiar world, both externally and within the confines of her own mind, has begun to shift into something unrecognizable. In the waning moments, Lysandra finds herself increasingly drawn to the alien flora that has overrun the trenches and battlefields of Veridius Prime. The plants, with their iridescent hues and pulsating life, seem to speak to something primal within her, a part of her being that she cannot understand or control. This fascination with the alien, this pull towards the other, marks a significant departure from the soldier she once was, a soldier of the Imperium, sworn to eradicate such Xenos threats. It is during a routine check of the trenches structure, in the dense fog of an early dawn, where she finds herself halted by an inexplicable sense of recognition. A creature, small and seemingly benign, stares at her that reflects not aggression, but a mirror to Lysandra's soul. In this moment, a silent communication passes between them, a recognition of shared essence that chills Lysandra to her core. Shaken by the encounter, Lysandra attempts to rejoin her squad, but the alien whispers in her mind grow louder, more insistent. They guide her movements, sharpen her senses, and imbue her with a predatory efficiency that feels both exhilarating and terrifying. Her comrades notice the change, their admiration for her prowess tinged with an undercurrent of fear. Lysandra herself begins to feel a disconcerting detachment from her fellow guardsmen, as if she is observing them from a great distance. The chasm between Lysandra and her humanity widens during a night assault on a Tyranid nest. As she moves through the battlefield, her actions are not her own, but those of the hive mind. She fights with a brutality and grace that is alien to her, each kill bringing a rush of exhilaration and a deepening sense of loss. The battlefield becomes a blur, a symphony of violence that resonates with the Tyranid song in her head. When the battle is over, Lysandra stands alone amidst the carnage, her uniform stained with blood, both human and Xenos. The realization that she can no longer distinguish between the two marks a turning point in her transformation. In the aftermath of the battle, as the first light of dawn breaks over the horizon, Lysandra's isolation becomes complete. She can no longer deny the changes within her, the Tyranid essence that has begun to overwrite her humanity. The whispers in her mind offer comfort, a promise of belonging and strength, but at the cost of her soul. As she looks out over the battlefield, now quiet and still, she understands that she stands at a threshold. Behind her lies her humanity, fragile and fraught with weakness. Ahead lies the abyss of the Tyranid hive mind, infinite and all-consuming. Lysandra, once a defender of the Imperium, has become something else, something alien. The battlefield of Veridius Prime, with its twisted landscapes and the ever-present threat of the Tyranid swarm, mirrors the war raging within her. As she steps into the dawn of a new day, it is clear that the Lysandra, who once fought for humanity, is gone, replaced by a being at war with itself. The planet, transformed by the Tyranid invasion, reflects the transformation within Lysandra. She moves through the trenches with a sense of purpose that is not entirely her own, drawn to the pulsating life of the Tyranid flora that now dominates the landscape. The beauty of the alien world fascinates her, a stark contrast to the horror it represents to the Imperium. Chapter 9. The Warped Battlefield. The dawn at Veridius Prime unveils a world transformed into a nightmarish landscape, unrecognizable to those who once called it home. As the first light pierces the thick veil of Tyranid spores swirling in the sky, it illuminates a desolation wrought by unrelenting alien invasion. The vibrant ecosystems and bustling outposts that once marked the planet's surface are now but distant memories, supplanted by a vast, silent testament to the Tyranids' consuming wrath. Lysandra, a figure of solitary defiance in this apocalyptic setting, moves with purpose through the trenches that scar the planet's flesh. These trenches, once bustling arteries of human resistance and ingenuity, now throb with an otherworldly life. Alien flora, feeding on the detritus of war, line the walls, pulsating subtly as if breathing in the toxic air, a sinister integration of Tyranid biology into the very structure of the planet's defenses. The eerie quiet of the dawn is occasionally shattered by the distant, unsettling calls of Tyranid creatures, sounds that are alien, yet disturbingly familiar to Lysandra. With each haunting cry, her connection to the Tyranid hive mind deepens, a bond forged not just in the heat of battle, but in the shared essence of this transformed world. The air, heavy with the promise of impending doom, seems to press against her, a constant reminder of the encroaching hive. As Lysandra navigates the labyrinthine network of trenches, her movements betray a blend of human caution and something else, a newfound fluidity that speaks of her increasing alignment with the Tyranid invaders. Each step is measured, each glance reveals not just a soldier's vigilance, but a deeper, more intrinsic understanding of her surroundings. The environment, once an obstacle to be navigated and overcome, now offers a bizarre sense of accommodation, its alien architecture resonating with the changes brewing within her. As the planet awakens to another day under siege, Lysandra stands at the precipice of her own humanity, gazing into the abyss. In the heart of Veridius Prime's desolation, Lysandra treads a path lined with the paradoxes of war and transformation. Each step is a testament to the alien kinship blossoming within her, a connection to the Tyranid horde that infests her very essence. This world, now a shadow of its former self, mirrors the metamorphosis unfolding within her, an unsettling harmony between soldier and swarm. Lysandra's newfound affinity with the alien environment is profound, unsettlingly deep. The once distinct rhythm of her human heart now beats in sync with the pulsating life of Veridius Prime, a planet reborn in the image of the Tyranid hive. This kinship, unfathomable to her past self, has become an irrefutable aspect of her existence, a bridge between the human and the utterly alien. The transformation manifests visibly upon her skin, which now bears the subtle, intricate patterns reminiscent of chitinous armor. Her eyes, once a clear reflection of her humanity, now glint with a predatory sheen, a mirror to the soul of the beast within. These changes, harbingers of her evolving identity, instill in her not horror but a profound sense of inevitability and belonging. Her human form, it seems, was but a chrysalis, destined to shed and reveal the true entity she was meant to become. The metamorphosis extends beyond the physical, warping her thoughts and perceptions. Strategic considerations, once purely human, now entwine with alien concepts and strategies. She finds herself pondering the hive mind's perspective with unsettling clarity, understanding its desires and objectives as if they were her own. This cognitive shift, bridging the gap between human soldier and Tyranid organism, signals a profound alteration in her being. Lysandra's acceptance of her fate is not marked by despair, but by a grim resolution. She recognizes the inevitability of her transformation, understanding that resistance is not just futile, but contrary to the new truths she perceives. In this acceptance, she finds not peace but a purpose reshaped by the Tyranid will, marking a pivotal moment in her journey from humanity to something wholly other. Through her eyes, the invasion of Veridius Prime is no longer a tale of resistance, but one of inevitable assimilation, a grim reminder of the Tyranids' power to reshape not just worlds, but the very essence of those who stand against them. The dawn breaks over Veridius Prime, revealing a landscape forever altered by the Tyranid invasion. The sky, a canvas of chaos, swirls with spores that blanket the planet in a suffocating embrace. Below, Lysandra moves through the trenches, her presence a stark contrast to the desolation around her. These once symbols of human resistance now serve as a testament to the Tyranids' insidious spread, their walls alive with alien flora, feeding off the remnants of war. The silence of the early morning is shattered by the abrupt echo of gunfire. Lysandra's reaction is immediate, her body honing in on the source with a precision that belies her human origins. Her senses, now intertwined with the Tyranid hive mind, guide her actions, allowing her to respond with a deadly accuracy that is both her legacy and her curse. As Lysandra confronts the shadows emerging from the mist, her perception is caught in a horrifying limbo between reality and nightmare. The figures before her flicker, oscillating between the familiar forms of Imperial guardsmen and the grotesque silhouettes of Tyranid warriors. With each figure she fells, a creeping dread takes hold, the lines between friend and foe blurring in her vision. The conflict intensifies, the trenches becoming a labyrinth of death shrouded in fog. Lysandra moves through this hellscape like a phantom, her actions guided by instincts that are no longer her own. The fog, a physical barrier that obscures her vision, is also a metaphor for the confusion that clouds her mind, a reflection of her descent into a reality shaped by the Tyranids' influence. As abruptly as it began, the conflict ceases, leaving Lysandra standing amidst the silence of the aftermath. Her breathing is heavy, a testament to the exertion and the adrenaline that courses through her veins. Yet, as the adrenaline fades, she is left with a haunting solitude, surrounded by the carnage of a battle that leaves her questioning the nature of her enemies. In this moment of stillness, Lysandra stands at the precipice of understanding, her mind a battleground between her fading humanity and the alien consciousness that seeks to claim her. The dawn's light, filtering through the spores in the air, casts long shadows across the trenches, a visual metaphor for the darkness that encroaches upon her soul. In the ashen hues of dawn, Lysandra wanders through the remnants of the battlefield, her gaze drifting across a landscape marred by violence. The muted light unveils a tableau of devastation, bodies scattered in a grotesque mimicry of rest. Each step Lysandra takes is heavy, burdened with the duality of her existence and the actions she has wrought. Her silence is deafening, punctuated only by Lysandra's solitary footsteps. She moves among the fallen, her heart a void of emotion, her mind a maelstrom of Tyranid whispers and fading human thoughts. The sight of a familiar insignia on a soldier's uniform pierces the fog of her alienated consciousness, igniting a fleeting spark of recognition and horror. But this spark is swiftly smothered by the cold logic of the hive mind, rationalizing the slaughter as a necessary culling. A shiver of clarity cuts through the haze of war, as Lysandra stumbles upon a soldier's uniform, mistaking it for Tyranid chitin in the dim light. The error sends a jolt through her, a reminder of the humanity she's slipping away from. Yet this moment of recognition is fleeting, quickly obscured by the creeping influence of the Tyranid consciousness within her. The trenches, once a symbol of human defiance, now feel like a chasm widening between Lysandra and her humanity. She senses the alienation not just in the physical distance from her comrades, but in the existential divide that has formed. The Tyranid presence within her grows stronger, drowning out the remnants of human connection, pulling her further into the embrace of the hive. The discovery of the soldier's uniform, its fabric soaked in the blood of battle, becomes a symbol of Lysandra's final severance from humanity. She stands on the brink, gazing into the abyss of her transformation. The uniform, once a mark of identity and belonging, now represents the past. She can no longer claim as her own. As Lysandra continues her solitary march, the world around her takes on a sinister beauty. The alien flora, thriving in the blood-soaked soil, seems to whisper secrets in a language her Tyranid-infused mind understands. Each step further into the trenches is a step deeper into her transformation, the landscape a reflection of her inner turmoil and change. Encounters with survivors become a treacherous dance of perception and reality. Friends and foes meld into indistinguishable shadows in Lysandra's altered vision, leading to confrontations that end in tragedy. These encounters only serve to deepen her isolation, severing the fragile threads of camaraderie that tether her to her fading humanity. A shard of metal, discarded in the mud, catches Lysandra's eye. Its surface, though marred and scratched, reflects back an image she scarcely recognizes. The face staring back at her is a hybrid of human and Tyranid, the physical manifestation of her internal conflict. This reflection cements her fate, a monstrous visage that marks the point of no return. In this twisted reality, Lysandra finds herself caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. The battlefield, with its chorus of Tyranid calls and the silent screams of the dead, becomes a mirror of her soul, torn, transformed, and irrevocably changed. As twilights embrace titans around Veridius Prime, the transformation within Lysandra reaches its zenith. No longer the guardsman her squad once followed, she is a creature born of nightmarish alchemy, a fusion of human resolve and Tyranid ferocity. Her senses, now a conduit for the hive mind's will, paint the remnants of her squad not as comrades but as silhouettes of the enemy within the obscuring mist. Lysandra's approach is silent, her presence a shadow that moves with unnatural grace through the trenches. The world around her pulses with the life of the hive, each beat guiding her towards the remnants of her squad. They are unaware of her transformation, unable to see the predator lurking in their midst. She is the hunter, they the prey, caught in a dance as old as life itself. With no warning but the whisper of her movements, Lysandra strikes. The trenches explode into chaos, gunfire echoing against the walls as her former allies scramble to meet this new threat. But Lysandra is not the guardsman they remember. She is something else entirely. Her laser gun, an extension of her will, sings a dirge of death, its bolts cutting through the fog with lethal precision. To her squad, it is a Tyranid ambush, a horror sprung from the mist to devour them. The conflict is a blur, a series of moments stitched together by fear and confusion. Lysandra moves among her squad with a speed and brutality that is beyond human, her actions guided by the cold, calculating will of the Tyranid hive. Her squadmates, caught in the disorienting maelstrom, can scarcely comprehend what they face. One by one they fall, torn apart by a force that wears the face of their sergeant, but is driven by the alien hunger of the Tyranids. As the gunfire fades, silence descends upon the trenches once more. The aftermath is a grotesque tableau of carnage, illuminated by the dim light of a failing laser gun. The bodies of her squad lie scattered, a testament to Lysandra's deadly efficiency. It is a scene of unspeakable brutality, the physical remains bearing silent witness to the horror of her betrayal. In this moment of grim victory, Lysandra stands alone amidst the devastation she has wrought. There is no triumph here, only the stark realization of what she has become, a creature of the hive, far removed from the humanity she once embodied. The blood on her hands and the silence of the dead speak to a truth she can no longer deny. She is no longer the protector she once was, but the very horror she was sworn to fight. The transformation is complete, and with it, the final severing of any ties to her past life. Lysandra, the human soldier, is no more, leaving only the Tyranid creature to stalk the battlefield in search of its next prey. In the aftermath of the ambush, as the trenches of Veridius Prime lay shrouded in the gloom of twilight, a scene of profound betrayal unfolds. Trooper Nera and Corporal Jackson, the remnants of a squad once bound by camaraderie and duty, find themselves ensnared in a nightmare woven by one of their own. Nerissa, her uniform torn and stained with the crimson of her blood, locks eyes with Jackson. Both are immobilized, not just by their wounds, but by a disbelief so profound it borders on paralysis. The carnage around them, a macabre testament to the battle just fought, forces a single haunting question to the forefront of their minds. How could Lysandra, their leader, their protector, morph into the harbinger of their doom? Yet, in the depths of their shock, a desperate hope flickers. Perhaps Lysandra was their savior, battling an unseen Tyranid threat in the mist. Lysandra's approach, measured and deliberate, belies the storm of alien hunger raging within her. To Naira and Jackson, she appears as a beacon of hope, the stalwart survivor who turned the tide of the ambush. Naira, despite the agony racking her body, offers Lysandra a smile born of relief and trust, a silent thank you to the comrade she believes has saved them. But the truth lurking in Lysandra's gaze, a chilling blend of malice and anticipation, remains unseen by the wounded troopers, obscured by their faith in the humanity they remember. As Lysandra kneels beside Naira, her hands extend not in comfort, but as instruments of a far more sinister intent. The coldness of her touch, the alien sharpness of her fingers, shatters the illusion of salvation. Naira's smile, a fragile thing, dissolves into a visage of confusion and then terror, as the reality of her fate becomes inescapably clear. Lysandra's aid is nothing more than a facade, a cruel mimicry of mercy designed to conceal the execution she administers, a silent, calculated act of violence that belies any semblance of the sergeant they once knew. In this moment, the grotesque transformation of Lysandra is laid bare, not through the physical alterations that have claimed her body, but through the betrayal of those who once called her sister in arms. The horror of Naira's realization, the finality of her silent scream, echoes through the trenches, a stark and haunting testament to the depth of Lysandra's fall from grace. In the eerie quiet that follows Naira's demise, Jackson is ensnared in a state of petrified disbelief. His body, rendered immobile by his injuries, betrays him, leaving his mind to grapple with the unfolding horror. Initially, he perceives Lysandra's actions as a grim form of compassion, a mercy, killing to spare Naira from the agony of her wounds. But as Naira's struggles fade into stillness, the horrifying truth crystallizes within him. Lysandra, once their guardian, has donned the mantle of executioner. Jackson's gaze, filled with a mix of horror and disbelief, follows Lysandra as she rises. His throat tightens, a silent scream that finds no voice. His mind races, desperate to reconcile the sergeant he respected with the creature she has become.
Lysandra, why?
He manages to whisper, his voice barely a breath against the cold air of the trench. Lysandra turns to face Jackson, her eyes devoid of the warmth they once held.
Jackson,
she begins, her voice a ghostly reflection of the commander he once knew.
in the grand tapestry of the cosmos, our struggles, our pain are but fleeting shadows. The hive offers release from this endless cycle of war and suffering. In their embrace there is no fear, no pain, only unity.
Jackson's heart pounds against his chest, a futile protest against the inevitability of his fate.
But at what cost, Lysandra? At the cost of our humanity?
He counters, his voice gaining strength from a well of desperation. Lysandra's expression remains impassive, her next words chilling in their detachment.
Humanity is a transient state, Jackson. Evolution is the only constant in an ever-changing universe. To resist is to suffer. I offer you peace and end to the struggle.
As Lysandra approaches, Jackson's attempts to recoil are hindered by his injuries. The realization that he is about to share Nira's fate ignites a primal fear within him, yet he finds himself transfixed by the transformation Lysandra has undergone. Her once familiar features are now marred by the grotesque beauty of the Tyranids' influence. Her hand reaches for him, and in that moment, Jackson understands the true horror of the Tyranids' promise.
I'm sorry, Lysandra, I can't. I won't become a part of that horror.
He stammers, his voice a mix of defiance and resignation. Lysandra's touch is cold, alien as she whispers,
Sleep now, warrior. Your battle is over.
Her words are meant to comfort, but they carry the weight of a final judgment. As darkness envelops him, Jackson's last thoughts are not of fear, but of sorrow for the friend he once knew, now lost to the hive's insidious call. His final breath is a silent plea for forgiveness, not for himself, but for Lysandra, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. In the dim twilight of Veridius Prime, Lysandra stands as a solitary figure amidst the desolation of the trench. The bodies of her squad, once comrades in arms, now lie strewn around her, silent testament to a horror wrought by her own hands. The air is thick, not with victory but with the stench of death and the heavy silence of extinction. Her gaze drifts downwards, settling on her hands. These hands, once human, now serve as instruments of a will not her own. The chitinous patterns that mark her skin seem to pulse with an alien life. a grotesque reminder of the transformation that has consumed her. Each drop of blood, each mark of violence, tells a story not of triumph but of tragic metamorphosis. Lysandra's heart, if it still beats with human emotion, aches with a profound sense of loss, the pang of sorrow for the person she once was, a soldier of the Imperium, a protector of humanity, is a fleeting shadow, quickly consumed by the overwhelming presence of the hive mind. Yet in this moment of solitude, the gravity of her actions bears down upon her. The realization that she has not only severed her ties to humanity, but has actively participated in its destruction, is a burden too heavy to bear. Around her, the trench is a macabre gallery of the fallen. Each body, each face frozen in a grimace of fear or agony, is a mirror reflecting the monster she has become. The silence is oppressive, punctuated only by the distant, discordant symphony of the tyrannic swarm, a constant reminder of the inescapable bond she now shares with the alien hive. Lysandra lifts her gaze to the darkening skies, where the swirling Tyranid spores dance like macabre snowflakes in a storm of unfathomable purpose. As the light fades, so too does any lingering semblance of her former self. She is the sole survivor, not by the virtue of her strength or cunning, but as the final witness to a chapter of unspeakable atrocity. In this desolate trench, surrounded by the grotesque tableau of her making, Lysandra embodies the ultimate horror of the Tyranid threat, not merely the physical annihilation they bring, but the existential terror of becoming the very monster one swore to destroy. Her story, a chilling saga of transformation and betrayal, is etched into the flesh of Veridius Prime, a grim reminder of the Tyranids' insidious power to corrupt and consume. As the darkness envelops her, Lysandra's figure becomes indistinguishable from the shadows that creep along the trench walls. She is a ghost, a spectre of war, forever trapped in the twilight between worlds, one human, one Tyranid, haunted by the echoes of a humanity lost to the endless hunger of the hive. In the dim twilight that now blankets Veridius Prime, Lysandra enacts a ritual of terrifying transformation. With hands reshaped into instruments of the hive's will, she delves into the earth, her actions guided by a primal urge unknown to her past human self. Each movement is deliberate, each burial an act of macabre assimilation, as she plants the bodies of her former comrades like grotesque seeds destined to nourish the alien flora. The trenches, once a maze of human resilience, become the site of a chilling transformation. Lysandra, moving with a purpose that transcends her lost humanity, rips open the soil to deposit the fallen. These acts, once unthinkable, now flow from her as naturally as breathing, driven by an alien instinct to integrate her squad into the Tyranid ecosystem. As she works, the remnants of who Lysandra once was evaporate into the cold Veridius night. Her actions are no longer her own, but those of the hive mind, consuming and repurposing with ruthless efficiency. The burial of her squad mates beneath the Tyranid corrupted soil serves as a grim testament to the erasure of her humanity, a final merging of human and alien destinies. Upon completing her grim task, Lysandra stands among the nascent garden of grotesque alien flora. Her voice, once human, now joins the discordant chorus of the Tyranid swarm, performing a ritual that seals her fate. This act is not just a surrender, but a proclamation of her new existence within the collective consciousness of the hive. As the tale of her transformation spreads, Lysandra becomes a legend, a dark symbol of the Tyranid threat's ultimate horror. Her story, murmured in hushed tones among the ranks of the Imperial Guard, serves as a cautionary tale. It speaks of the war's power not just to kill, but to corrupt, turning protectors into the very monsters they fought against. In this new reality, Lysandra embodies the war's deepest terror, the loss of self to an unrelenting alien hunger. Her existence, once marked by camaraderie and human resilience, is now a testament to the Tyranids' insidious strength. Her story, etched in the annals of Imperial history, stands as a stark reminder of the conflict's true cost, not the loss of life, but the erasure of identity, the transformation of the defender into the devourer. As Veridius Prime falls deeper into the shadow of the Tyranid threat, Lysandra's legacy is not one of heroism, but a cautionary emblem of the war's darkest potential, to transform, to corrupt, and ultimately to consume. In the end, her story is a macabre ballet of horror and transformation, a disturbing and brutal testament to the Tyranids' relentless advance and the fragile nature of humanity in the vast, indifferent cosmos. As the dust of war settles over the desecrated landscape of Veridius Prime, The tale of Lysandra, once a stalwart defender of humanity, now serves as a chilling epilogue to the Tyranid invasion. Her transformation, a stark emblem of the Tyranids' horrific assimilative power, unveils a cosmic horror far beyond the comprehension of those she once stood beside. The annihilation of her individuality, swallowed by the insatiable maw of the hive mind, mirrors the broader existential dread that pervades the galaxy's war-torn frontiers. In the silence that follows the storm of conflict, Lysandra's fate encapsulates the profound terror at the heart of the war against the Tyranids. Her metamorphosis from guardian to grotesque herald of the swarm underscores a grim reality. The true horror of the Tyranid threat lies not in the physical devastation they wreak, but in their ability to erase the very essence of what it means to be human. Lysandra's story, echoing through the shattered remains of imperial defenses, becomes a parable of unending conflict. It highlights the Tyranids' existential threat, a darkness that does not merely kill, but consumes identity, leaving behind nothing but a hollow echo of what once was. This narrative serves as a stark reminder of the eternal vigilance required to hold back the night, a fight not just for survival, but for the soul of humanity itself. In the aftermath, Lysandra's transformation stands as a dark beacon, illuminating the Tyranids' ultimate victory not as a conquest of territory, but as an assimilation of beings. Her legacy, whispered in the dark corners of the Imperium, is a harrowing testament to the war's stakes, echoing the relentless hunger of the swarm and the indifferent vastness of the cosmos. The story of Veridius Prime and its fallen defender will linger long in the memory that haunts the survivors, a somber meditation on the price of survival in a universe that remains, as ever, indifferent to the struggles of its inhabitants, and a perpetual reminder of the fragility of human existence in the face of an all-consuming alien will.
Alright, and that was all 3 parts of the Flesh Garden story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it was a fun listen. I enjoyed writing it. No commentary. Yeah, hope you guys liked it. It's really long. It took me a while to make too. But it has its issues, you know. But I think it's a fun lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good day or good night. See you next time.